Hello and welcome back to my channel. Make sure you like and subscribe to my channel. Let's begin. Chapter 74, Apocalyptic War. Oh sheet. No one knew which of the three said it. The sentiment was shared between Ichigo, Zeni, and his mother. As it was, they had to move quickly. Ichigo's brain flashed through a few possible courses of action before settling on one. He turned on his heel and lashed out with Tensa Zangetsu. Masaki blinked as remnants of chains fell to the ground, clinking. Zeni. Get her home, then get your butt over and help me fight him. No. Masaki rejected, putting every bit of motherly authority she had in her voice. Both Ichigo and Zeni flinched, stumbling from where they'd both begun to move. Why the F not? Ichigo demanded. If you fight hell in the living world, you're going to kill a lot of innocent people who are just in the way. Masaki pointed out, her voice hard. You need a way to force hell back into this dimension. And exactly how am I supposed to do that without fighting him? Ichigo asked sarcastically. The same way he forced you out without fighting you, Masaki answered, looking at her son intensely. Open a portal under him and shove him through when he's not expecting it. And the only way that's going to happen is if Zeni stays here. At least let me take you home first. Ichigo pleaded. No, Masaki replied, her voice firm. Now that I'm free of hell's chains, I can feel them, my powers. Ichigo blinked behind the mask. Your powers? Your father never told you. Masaki cracked a cocky smirk that made Ichigo realize exactly whom he'd inherited that trait from. She raised her arm, and Raisher quickly gathered, forming a bow. Ichigo, I'm a Quincy. The wizard's eyes went wide. She was a Quincy. Her powers were coming back. Of course. When she'd become a Togabito, she'd gained access to Ryuryoku again. But the Quincy abilities must have been suppressed by Hell to keep her prisoner. Now that the chains were gone, Hell no longer had the power to hold her power at bay. But if his mom was a Quincy, then, did that make Ichigo a Quincy? Oh God, did he have another spirit lurking inside him to be the manifestation of his Quincy powers? But wait, if he was a Quincy, why hadn't he ever been exposed to them while growing up? Did his father being a Shinigami have something to do with it? I have so many questions. And I'll answer all of them as best I can when this is all over. But right now, while Zeni is working on that portal, he needs me to be there to protect him. Trust me, Ichigo, Masaki told him with a reassuring smile. I don't know what part of him you are, but you do. And if you're willing to accept him, then I will too. I don't care what you look like, what you are. She reached up and touched Ichigo's Resurrection mask tenderly. I know who you are, beneath that mask. You're still my Ichigo, my precious son. I just want you to be safe, Ichigo murmured. I know. You never could hide your heart from me. You've wanted all your life to protect me, to protect your sisters. But I'm your mother. It's my job to protect you. Please, just trust me. Ichigo didn't know what to say. Finally, he nodded. All right, Mom. Stay safe. He shot Zeni a look, and the Togabito nodded resolutely. With that, he vanished in a burst of sonido, launching himself into the living world. Inoue knew instantly when things started to go wrong. No. She grit her teeth. What's wrong, Inoue? Hatchigen asked urgently. Is the burden too much? That's not it. The gates. There's a hole in the gates of hell. Despite everything, the gates have materialized. Hatchigen paled. Shihoin-san, what happened? The blast that made the hole came from within hell, Yoruchi reported quickly. Kisuke says the signature belongs to Ichigo. The gates have always been the weakest point between the living world and hell by necessity, Urahara explained. By punching a hole through them, Ichigo has linked hell and the living world until the gates can repair themselves. That idiot. Yoruchi swore. Kurosaki-kun wouldn't have done that for no reason. Inoue reminded them. It was probably his last resort, and since the Shinigami blew up the gates before, thought it wouldn't be too bad. It doesn't matter why he did it. The fact is that he did, and now we have to deal with the fallout. Inoue, can you handle the additional influx of hell erasure? I'm trying, but it's like trying to keep the ground clean when someone's bleeding to death on it, Inoue muttered with a strained tone. Hold on, Inoue. Tessai. Hi, Urahara Dano. Kisuke, what are you doing? Yoruchi demanded. Tessai's going to set up a couple of barriers around the gates, to restrict the erasure flow. Heartened by the news, Inoue redoubled her efforts, doing her best to keep the living world's erasure from taking on Hell's properties. Here you are, a new voice commented in satisfaction from a few feet behind her. Inoue stiffened as fear shot through her body. Hatchi-kun. Disengage the technique, Inoue. Hatchi's voice was calm, but urgent. Disengage, and run. But what about? You can't protect yourself while you're using that technique, Inoue. And if you die here, then you won't be able to protect the living world. Go. Inoue swallowed, but released the Soten Kishun. And then she focused her intent towards her Santen Keshin, and sped off towards the relative safety of the Urahara shop. Hell lazily watched her go. So, her name is Inoue, and she is the one who was capable of halting the assimilation. What an interesting power. I wonder, does she have control over the living world's erasure? Perhaps an offshoot of a Quincy. He paused for a moment in thought, then shook his head. No matter. Her soul will belong to me soon enough. Hatchigen had heard enough. He swept his hand in front of his face, conjuring his hollow mask. Not wasting any time, he clapped his hands, creating over a dozen pillars to form a gigantic shield to the left of Hell. Ryubi no Jaman. Oh. Hell observed the shield in interest. I've never heard of this barrier. It looks quite strong. He then noticed Hatchi going through some additional motions. There's more. By all means. Let's see your best. I wonder how it compares to the gates. Unnerved by Hell's nonchalant acceptance of his barriers, Hatchi nevertheless summoned a great deal of his Ryuryoku to create a large black circular barrier, placed directly in front of Hell. Koko no Jaman. Hell approached the barrier in curiosity. Interesting indeed. A one-way barrier. To allow attacks in while trapping the opponent and his attacks inside. Very nice. Yes, it could. Prove useful for fighting the Rayo. Please, do show me more. Seamlessly switching to another set of hand seals, Hatchi promptly created several dozen small hexagonal barriers and put them together in a honeycomb structure. This one went behind Hell. Kigai no Jaman. Hell inspected the latest barrier closely. I see. This is an attempt to create a powerful barrier that won't shatter all at once if part of it is compromised. And, oh. The barriers resonate with each other. Individually weak, but together quite strong. Very promising. It wouldn't surprise me if this barrier approached the strength of the gates themselves. Hatchi smiled tightly at the compliment even as he conjured an obelisk and wings of fire, from which many planks combined to form long red wings. The wings promptly folded on each other, forming a circle with a large hole in the middle. Hatchi placed it above Hell. Hoyaku no Jaman. Hell looked at it with an expression of confusion and minor disappointment. While visually impressive, I don't see how useful this barrier is. It doesn't seem to hinder me in any way. The premier property of a phoenix is immortality, it will never die. In the same way, the property of the Hoyaku no Jaman is that it reinforces other barriers and will restore them if damaged, Hatchi stated calmly. He made a simple hand seal in front of his face with his left hand, and swung his right hand down. Shurju no Simon. The four barriers that Hatchi had created sparked with power, and a tinted prism-like cube barrier formed around Hell, with the four pre-existing barriers enforcing its power. You believe this will keep me here? Hell asked casually, approaching the wall to his right, the wall without one of the Jamin. He leaned in and inspected it with a critical eye. Not permanently, Hatchi admitted. Perhaps not even for very long. But long enough to perhaps move Karakura out of the way of your battle. He tapped his ear. Urahara-san. Hell is in the living world. Please activate the Tenkai Ketchu. Understood. Activation will require a few minutes, please keep Hell occupied until then. You know, I find myself quite impressed, Hell admitted easily, placing his hand on the barrier and quickly withdrawing it when it sparked at him. Oh, very well done. A barrier capable of defending itself. In my time, barriers such as these could only be created by the Ryo. I never had the talent for them. Soul Society has come far from its humble beginnings. Hatchi watched him carefully, uncertain. Hell was too calm, too at ease with his situation. A fully mastered Shirju no Simon had never been conquered, to his knowledge. He'd even had it tested by the other Taicha-level wizard, had them attempt to destroy it with their Bankai. If Hell could break out of this barrier, then he simply had very few options. Let's suppose for a minute that you actually have successfully captured me, Hell suggested. The purpose of your, what was it again? Koko no Jamin. Its purpose for this prison is to allow you to attack me without fear of retribution. So why aren't you attacking? Surely you know at least one good spell. Hatchi did in fact know many powerful Heido. But he had always known his powers weren't suited to combat. Unlike Tessai Taicho, he'd never really mastered any of the branches of Heido. He could cast them, sure, but he still required the full incantation, and their strength still needed work. There was a reason he had only been the lieutenant of the Kido Corps, and after his escape to the living world Hatchi had instead chosen to master his own brand of unique Kido. I know several, Hell. But none suitable for you. Oh. I know the results of Kurosaki Ichigo's conflict with you, and he is far faster, far stronger than I. Opening the Koko no Jamin to allow my attack inside would give you a split-second opportunity to escape. Therefore, any attack I use should be capable of halting you or pushing you back, perhaps a spell with a suitably explosive impact. I even have such a spell in mind. But it is a spell I have not mastered yet. I could not guarantee that it would be strong enough to keep you in. So I will instead focus on keeping you trapped there for as long as I can, until a suitable method to deal with you is created. Hell's expression didn't falter in the slightest. In fact, he seemed pleased. Perceptive as well, and you know the limits of your own techniques. Yes, you will make a fine lieutenant when this world is absorbed. Hatchi's eyes narrowed slightly behind his mask. This world will not be absorbed, Hell. I'm afraid that you are quite wrong. Hell slammed a fist into the wall of the Shirju no Simon that he'd been examining, and it cracked audibly before beginning to repair itself. You see, I am in my dimension, and I am here. He struck it again, and the barrier cracked even more. Even if that were not enough, the gates of Hell are open. The door has been opened. Our worlds are linked. Hell took a step back and then shot forward with both his fists striking the barrier at the same time. At once, the Shirju no Simon shattered. Hatchi's mask crumbled in the wake of his shock, and he watched in thinly disguised horror as Hell turned to face him with a knowing smile. Can't you feel it? Can't you feel the resonance? Hell asked triumphantly. He raised an arm to the sky, and above him, a portal spiraled open, wider and wider, until it was approximately 30 meters wide. From within, Hatchi could see hundreds, perhaps thousands of Togabito, waiting for the order. An order that Hell was only too happy to give. Attack. Kill the defenders of this world. At once, the Togabito began to swarm out of the portal. Hatchi began quickly chanting the incantation for one of the most powerful Heido he knew, but he was startled when a black and white blur rushed past him with a battle cry. Getsuga Tensho. The crescent attack ripped into and through dozens of Togabito, sending their bodies falling to the ground below, only to be reclaimed by miniature portals. The remaining Togabito froze, unsure how to take this new threat. "Ah, Kurosaki Ichigo. I was wondering when you'd join us," Hell greeted amenably. Ichigo, still in his Bankai and Resurrection, growled at Hell audibly. "You're going back to your med dimension, Hell." "Of course I am. After all, when I'm through, this will be my dimension," Hell proclaimed. "Do you really think you can stop me, and all the Togabito here, at the same time?" Ichigo's eyes glowed with resolve. "You're not the only one who can summon subordinates. Hell. Let me show you the difference between quantity and quality." He raised his face to the sky and let loose a piercing hollow scream. Within moments, for Garganta opened, and out came Ichigo's Arrancar allies, Ulquiorra, Neliel, Harabel, Stark and Lilinet. Ulquiorra kneeled in midair before Ichigo. "How may we serve, Kurosaki-sama?" Ichigo didn't even look at him, his gaze completely focused on Hell. "Ulquiorra. Take out the trash. Protect Karakura." "Yes, my liege." Hell's confident expression faltered somewhat. You are the king of Hueco Mundo?" Ichigo didn't answer. Instead, he addressed the wizard standing behind him. "Hatchi, can you get that portal closed?" "If I'm given time," Hatchi answered, casting his eyes nervously on the situation. He'd never felt quite so outclassed before. "Good. Neliel. Protect Hatchi here while he works." "Right," the former Espada Trace acknowledged, moving herself between Hell and the wizard. Hell just stared incredulously as Kurosaki Ichigo continued to give orders. This boy, was not a pure hollow. He wasn't even an Arrancar, but a wizard. And yet he was the king of Hueco Mundo. How had that happened? More importantly, how many more Arrancar could he summon? And how strong were the ones he'd called for? So Hell simply waited patiently, listening in case Kurosaki gave out any important information. "Harabel." "Yes." Ichigo's eyes still didn't leave Hell, but his voice softened just a little. "Go. Find your friends and get them out. Just be careful of the effect of Hell's Ryatsu. If you find yourself becoming overly aggressive, get out as quickly as you can. If any Shinigami give you trouble, tell them I sent you. After you find them, go to the gates of Hell, my mother's there. Protect her with your life." Harabel's eyes widened, and then she nodded sharply. "Yes, my liege." She vanished in a burst of sonido and zoomed into the portal, killing several Togabito on her way through. Ichigo tapped his ear where the interdimensional communicator was. "Urahara, can you hear me?" "Loud and clear." "What's the status?" "Keep it brief. Inoue was interrupted by Hell, and has retreated to my shop. I'm recalling Kuchiki to act as her support. Tessai is en route to the gates to do what he can. The portals from Hell, excluding the one you're at, have ceased, and everyone is busy finishing off their current opponents. Resonance with Hell has begun. Dimensional instability has made transference to Soul Society virtually impossible at this time." "Got it. When Tessai's done over there, send him our way to help Hatchi." "Understood. Any special instructions for us?" Stark asked mildly. "Be ready to aid me when I give the signal." "What's the signal?" "You'll know it when you see it." Stark sighed but nodded. "I should have known better than to ask." No one moved for a moment. The orders had been given, and each side was waiting for the other to act first. Then Ulquiorra broke the silence by unleashing his full power and jumping straight into Resurrection, Segunda Etapa, generating a Lanza del Relampago. "Chains up," one of the Togabito, presumably a commander, shouted. The countless soldiers manifested the chains that bound them to Hell and held it before them defensively, forming an enormous barrier that should have been considered impenetrable. Ulquiorra took a moment to aim, and then flung the javelin above the front line's heads and chains. "Humph. He missed," Hell commented derisively. Just then, a massive teal explosion surged from within Hell, reaching and engulfing the vast majority of the Togabito. When the dust settled, a good half of Hell's forces were obliterated, dead or dying. Broken chains littered the landscape for a few precious moments before disintegrating into nothing. Ichigo's eyes never left Hell, but a fierce smirk grew beneath his mask. Would you care to revise your opinion? Chad staggered back from another punishing blow from Kieru. The Togabito was frighteningly fast, and had strength in spades despite only appearing somewhat healthier than his first starved appearance. It didn't help that his chains had been loosened so Kieru could actually make proper fists and use the chains as knuckle dusters. Kieru pressed his assault, but Chad brought his Brazo Derecha del Gigante up to deflect the attack and twist it away. Not for the first time, Chad mentally thanked Yoruchi for helping teach him better footwork and his high-speed technique. Even so, as much as he hated to admit it, he was losing this battle. He hadn't even managed to land a single punch on Kieru. You're quite strong, for a human, Kieru admitted. Not many could stand up to me during Hell's first invasion. Then again, I am still recovering from Hell's punishment. He shrugged and moved out of a fighting stance. It's too bad that you've already lost. What? Chad spared a split second to glance at the school he'd been defending. It was still untouched from their battle. What are you talking about? Kieru sighed. Hell has entered the living world, and the gates are open. I can feel them, just as I can feel that the living world's ratio is no longer being changed back to normal. Surely you can feel it now. To Chad's horror, he could. The air was noticeably thicker, was tangibly more, filled with malice. No. He whispered. This can't be. I'm sorry, Sato-kun. But there's no point in fighting anymore. In a few minutes, the first humans will be affected by Hell's Ryatsu. Will they go insane and fight their fellow man? Or will they simply drop dead? I don't know. But it's over. If you want to maintain a human existence, then you should run and find a place to hide. Chad grit his teeth. No. He wouldn't run. Not when so many were unknowingly counting on him, on his friends. With a thought and brief exertion of focus, he materialized the Ryuraku. It took mere moments for him to identify ribbons he was looking for. He grasped them all, and focused on the information they contained. Inoue was alive, but her Ryatsu echoed with fear and guilt. She was at Urahara's shop, probably trying to find a way to help since the plan had fallen to pieces. Ishida was alive. Wounded lightly, but coldly determined. He was not far away, still in the middle of battle with Hana. Ichigo was in the living world, high in the air. That made Chad feel immeasurably relieved, until he realized that Hell was in the living world too. Ichigo was almost certainly facing him. Chad quickly felt his way through the rest of the Ryuraku in the area with a sinking heart. Ichigo was with a few hollows, including one who Chad thought might be Okuiora, but there were so many strong Togabito there. Ichigo was strong, but if Chad was having this much trouble with just one, how would Ichigo against this many? No. Ichigo was stronger than he was. Maybe this many Togabito were truly nothing to him now. Maybe it'd be better if Chad just stayed out the way. Maybe Chad would only be a burden. He certainly felt like one, not being able to defeat even this one Togabito. Maybe the only thing he was good for was stalling for time. What was he thinking? Why was he acting as if it were a possibility to let Ichigo fight alone if he could help it? Ichigo needed him. It didn't matter if Ichigo had grown 10 times, 100 times, even 1,000 times stronger than him. They'd sworn to fight for each other, to protect one another. If Chad gave up on being able to fight at Ichigo's side as he'd vowed, on using his incredible strength to protect others as his grandfather had taught him, then he would never be able to meet Ichigo's eyes again. No. He would finish his fight with Kieru swiftly, and help Ichigo. He would not break his oaths. His pride demanded it. As if by instinct, Chad reached for the coin he regarded as more important than his own life. He knew what he had to do. He knew his duty. His fingers touched the coin, and light flashed. Kieru covered his eyes, momentarily blinded. When he could see again, he looked curiously at the human he'd been fighting. Before, the teenager had only manifested armor on his arms. Now, it seemed, he'd finished the job. His whole body, save his head, was covered in armor. The armor from Chad's waist up was the very dark red of carmine, with a large white stylized rose emblazoned in the center of his chest. Chad's legs were black, with the strips of the same dark red running down the sides. Kieru watched curiously as his opponent moved experimentally, taking a few careful steps and twisting his upper body. The armor did not seem to inhibit his movement in the slightest. "Congratulations on your new power," Kieru commented. "Have you got a name for it yet, or is it simply an extension of what you had before?" "Yes, I have a name for it." Chad met his opponent's eyes again. "El Deber del Corazon." "I'm sorry, but my friend needs me. I can't afford to waste any more time on you." He took a step, and green light flickered for the briefest instant before he launched forward with far more speed than he'd had a few minutes prior. Kieru's eyes widened and brought his chain-clad arms up to block a punch from Chad's left arm, but much to his shock he was sent flying anyway. Chad chased after him silently, catching him with his left arm and ping a punch with his glowing right arm. "El Directo," he cried out as he landed a strike to Kieru's gut from underneath. The energy blasted through Kieru completely, obliterating his insides and sending a column of spiritual energy blasting into the sky. The moment it faded, Chad dropped Kieru to the ground. He reached down and took a handful of Kieru's chains with both hands. With a grunt of effort, he broke them, and was gratified to see the remainder of Kieru's chains began to vanish. You can break the chains." Kieru gasped, coughing out blood. Chad ignored him and began charging power to his Brazo Izquierda del Diablo, preparing his strongest attack. "Sorry. I can't risk you recovering. May you find peace in your next life. I pray hell doesn't reclaim your soul again." "I understand." Kieru hacked out more blood. "Make it quick." Chad nodded and pulled back his fist. "La muerte." Kieru's body was instantly crushed. Chad didn't waste any time waiting to see if Hell's portal reclaimed his soul or not. He was needed elsewhere. He could sense that Ishida was finishing with his opponent as well. It was time to go to Ichigo. Hell leapt back away from Yamamoto as the latter swung Zenka no Tachi yet again, unleashing an impossibly hot wave of concentrated fire and heat that would have utterly destroyed him if he'd caught even a sliver of it. "What happened to you to drag you to this level of power?" Hell questioned in utter disbelief. And then Yamamoto vanished. "More than you will ever know," his voice uttered darkly from directly behind Hell. Flickering away in a high-speed technique, Hell gathered his power to his Zanpakuto. "Asahi no Kagami," he commanded, and light flashed off the blade. Yet Yamamoto's attention didn't sway in the slightest, and Hell could feel that the illusion had failed to take hold. It had broken in the same instant that it had landed on his opponent. A flicker of frustration flashed across his face. "It seems Asahi no Kagami won't affect you. All techniques have a counter, and I know the ability of Asahi no Kagami," Yamamoto stated calmly. "It searches for conflicts within the spirit. Conflicts between the heart and the mind, no matter how old, no matter how well lived with. In effect, it makes the opponent his own worst enemy, for everyone lies to themselves. Everyone knows what it means to delude themselves in order to go on with life, to justify the reprehensible. But the counter to your ability is laughably simple, Hell. To understand all you have done, to accept who you are. To have your heart and mind in accord." Yamamoto let loose a vicious smile. "Do you know how I spent my time preparing for you? I came here knowing the likelihood of my demise, so I spent my time settling my affairs. I spent it reflecting on myself, understanding my own decisions and the ones of those around me. I spent it resolving conflicts both present and future. I spent it forgiving myself. I have no regrets, I have done all I can. And with that knowledge behind me, you have no power over me. Hell remained silent for another moment, then opened his mouth to speak. You are becoming very annoying, Yamamoto Soteicho. Very well. If I cannot have you destroy yourself, then I shall have to do the job myself. Hell disappeared in a burst of high-speed moment, and reappeared inside Yamamoto's guard, Asahi no Kagami already in motion. Hell completed the slash without any resistance, but winced when he heard Asahi no Kagami shriek in pain. Instinct alone saved him from a retaliatory strike from Zanka no Tachi as he flashed away once again, bringing his blade to bear. Or rather, what was left of his blade. Asahi no Kagami was now nothing more than a short stub of metal on a hilt. What? Hell whispered. How? Yamamoto could not help but bubble of pleased satisfaction that settled in his chest. Can't you tell, oh Hell? I thought this was your world. Tell me, what does your world tell you about me? Hell narrowed his eyes. I see. Your Bankai is not merely your sword, it is your whole self. Your body is wreathed in truly impressive heat. I wonder how it is not visible to the naked eye. Well then, since you asked, I guess I will make it visible to your eyes as well. Yamamoto took a single breath and, after a prolonged moment, exhaled. The invisible heat that surrounded Yamamoto's form was suddenly visible, shifting and writhing like fire, yet never growing too far from his body. Zanka no Tachi, West, Zanjitsu Goki. Its heat reaches 15 million degrees. You might say that when I'm using my Bankai, it's as if my body and blade are clad in the flames of the sun. Hell paused to let that sink in. You are a terrifying old man, he admitted. Such heat could not possibly appear in the form of flames, that fire is your Ryatsu. It was invisible because you willed it to be. And now I see it because you have allowed me to. And yet you are not weakening in the slightest. With power such as that, you might as well be a god yourself. I find myself wanting to either laugh at the foolishness of any mortal willing to go against you, or fearful of the kind of powers that made that possible. Hell chuckled and shook his head. I cannot attack your body, nor can I attack your heart and mind. However, I wonder, how long can you maintain your Bankai under a constant assault? He extended his free hand, fingers splayed wide with the palm facing the desert sands. Souls. You whose forms have decayed, you who were blinded by the light of your own sins, I offer you a chance for redemption. If you would see the light of day once again, arise and take arms. Yamamoto watched silently as the desert itself lurched, sands flying in every direction, obscuring his vision for several moments. When the air cleared, Yamamoto was facing an army of hundreds, of thousands of men of every race and creed. Some wielded gigantic weapons, some went barehanded, and still others were visibly preparing magics of some sort. Standing above them was Hell himself. Tell me, Yamamoto, Soteicho of the Godai 13, can you destroy an army of Togabito and still defeat me? And then Yamamoto could hold it no longer, he let out a derisive snort. You call that an army? Let me show you how it's done. He planted the tip of Zanka no Tachi into the desert sands. Corpses. Ashes of the dead, scattered by my flames. Lend me your aid. For a spell I shall grant you the pleasure of battle. The ground rumbled as a great rift opened in the desert, ash erupting out of it as though it were a small volcano. The ash swept across the land and took shape, forming countless skeletal warriors for as far as the eye could see. Yamamoto met Hell's eyes, taking pride and satisfaction at the dumbfounded expression on Hell's face. Zanka no Tachi, South, Kaka Jumanokushi Dezojin. It took Hell a moment, but he managed to regain his voice. Your Bankai gives you an impressive offense, a virtually perfect defense that destroys all that dares draw near, and the ability to summon your dead enemies as skeletons of ash to fight for you. He shook his head with a chuckle. It's ludicrous to think of you as a mere Shinigami. Your Ryatsu lies on the border of transcendence. And here I thought I wouldn't have a real challenge until I reached the rail. Enough talk. Yamamoto commanded sharply and pointed Zanka no Tachi at the army before him. The countless skeletons rushed towards the force of Togabito, and the battle was begun. No Togabito will distract me. No attack will faze me. No defense will stop me. I came here to end the threat you pose to all the worlds, and you will not escape me. Chapter 75, On the Front Line. Hell stared at Ichigo with an unreadable expression while Ulquiorra methodically destroyed every Togabito that had been waiting to invade the living world. I must ask, why isn't he eating any of the Togabito's souls? He asked calmly. Too risky, Ichigo answered in the same tone. Too much chance of accidentally inheriting their chains and being enslaved to you. If anything, Hell's scrutiny increased. Did he determine this himself? I warned all the Arankar and Vastolord. I believe seeing Grimmjow confirmed it for Ulquiorra, at least. Ichigo paused. That is what happened to Grimmjow, isn't it? Hell snorted. Of course it is. He saw an opportunity to gain more power and took it. Well, that explains why the number of hollows I've acquired from Hueco Mundo has been practically non-existent, at least. You've proven more intelligent and capable than I expected. But even so, you're at a disadvantage here. Ichigo was glad that his mask hid his expression so well. It meant all he had to do was maintain a calm tone of voice. How so? Your goal is to protect this world, correct? That means that you cannot use your full power, or this city will be leveled in our battle, Hell pointed out. The same applies to you, Ichigo retorted. You want the living world's souls to augment your own forces. Hardly, Hell disagreed. Do you realize how long it takes to train a soul to be able to use my chains in anything approaching a combat situation? I don't care about the people of this world. I just want this world. Once I have Hueco Mundo and Soul Society, then I'll have all the souls anyway. Ichigo went quiet for a moment. So, you have nothing stopping you from all your power to crush us right now. That's right. Ichigo nodded, seemingly coming to a decision. Stark. Resurrection. And get behind him. Understood. Come, Lillinette. Stark and his fraction stood closer together, and Stark laid a hand on her head gently. Kick about, Los Lobos. Hell blinked as he witnessed the two Arankar being a complete being once more before vanishing in an impressive display of sonido. What was the point of that? He asked, with just the slightest bit of derision coloring his tone. I already know that you are hampered with the burden of protecting the people of this world. This show of force is useless. It's not a show of force. It's simple logic. If you attack me, then your back will be open to an attack from Stark. If you attack Stark, then your back will be open to an attack from me. And neither of us will hold back. And what happens if I ignore the both of you and decide to attack Karakura directly? Hell asked. Will you both attack me and forsake Karakura? They won't need to forsake it. Hell turned to one side to see Ishida standing in midair, his bow at the ready. A Quincy. Hell observed. Yes. Surely by now you've noticed, there are no more Togabito in the living world. And no more portals are opening. What of it? That means that all the defenders of this world are free to defend against you. Inoue's voice cut in, and everyone turned to where she was. Standing atop her Santen Keshin several meters away, Inoue's expression was calm, but determined as she turned to look at Ichigo. Karakura is safe, Kurosaki-kun. How can I help? Ichigo was about to ask her to retreat to a safe distance, but then Chad's hand clapped onto his shoulder. Ichigo twisted his neck to face him. Looking into Ichigo's mask, Chad remained unafraid. Ichigo, this is not just your fight. We are here to support you. That's right, Kurosaki. Ishida locked eyes with Ichigo. You've obviously got a plan, or else you would have attacked him by now. So tell us how to help. Ichigo's eyes went wide behind his mask for a moment, and felt his grip on hollowification tremble under the weight of his emotion. Against his will, he remembered the illusions Asahi no Kagami had turned upon him, and the lessons imparted by them. He couldn't let pride keep him from accepting help. He had to trust in his companions, and allow them to make their own decisions. Inoue. Chad. Ishida. Ichigo took a breath and steadied himself. Thank you. Hell laughed lowly. What a lovely scene. Worthy of any play. But you are fools for gathering here. He drew the sword at his hip. Reveal the truth, Asahi no Kagami. Inoue, use your Soten Kishun over all of us. Ichigo ordered. Reject all illusions and keep Hell from leaving. Chad, protect her. Hi, the two answered. Almost instantly, a golden bubble materialized over them all, excluding the open portal to Hell, Nelio and Hatchi. All the illusions that had begun to take form dissipated as Inoue negated Asahi's power. Ichigo was about to give more orders, but he was interrupted by Hell directly attacking Ishida. Stark, he cried out, flashing into Sonido. Stark whipped one of his guns in position, and fired a powerful Zero without any charge time. The Zero rocketed into the space that Hell would have been, had he not stopped just shy of it to bring his blade to defend against Tensa Zangetsu. Ichigo was instantly hit with a flash of familiarity, but there was no time to deal with it then. Ishida immediately took advantage of the blatant opportunity and promptly fired a couple of dozen arrows into Hell's back simultaneously before using Hirenkyaku to retreat to a safer distance. He frowned when he saw that Hell didn't even seem to register the attack. It would seem he'd need to use strong individual attacks rather than a number of weaker ones, or perhaps he'd just need more of them. Ichigo and Hell swiped at each other in a flurry of high-speed attacks, with neither giving ground, until another Zero materialized without warning and slammed into Hell's side, blasting him several meters away from Ichigo, and well away from anyone else. No orders were needed, all at once, several ranged attacks were launched. El Directo. Licht Regen. Zero Metrolita. Getsuga Tensho. The onslaught was too large and too fast for Hell to avoid, but much to Ichigo's frustration, Hell had another trick up his sleeve. He swiped the air in front of him and wordlessly conjured a tall translucent barrier just in time for it to take on the combined attacks, which impacted with an explosion that whipped the air around Ichigo and his companions. When the smoke dissipated, the barrier was gone, but Hell was hardly injured. Some scratches and small rips in clothes were the only evidence of the power behind the attack. DMN, Ichigo cursed. I thought we had him there. Did you really think that the only tool at my disposal was Asahi no Kagami? Hell asked with a trace of amusement. It would have been very foolish indeed not to have a means of defending myself against such an attack. Ishida readjusted his glasses as he reassessed the situation. Obviously overwhelming that barrier from a single direction isn't a feasible way to defeat him. Perhaps if we can force him to stretch it out, attack from multiple directions at once. We'll need to hold him in place, though, so we don't accidentally attack each other, he proposed. Stark nodded. I have a technique like that. He holstered his pistols, and they disappeared. An instant later, a pack of grey wolves materialized at his side. Let's finish this, Stark. Lilinette's quiet but resolved voice came out of Stark's mouth. The wolves rushed Hell, who was staring wide-eyed at the technique. You just split your soul. Hell gasped in shock. Just like that? What are you? Stark didn't answer. Kurosaki-sama, Ishida-san, if you possess a technique that will encase him and a few of my wolves, use it the instant the wolves bite. Ichigo, who had been staring at Stark in surprise, recovered and nodded at him, and then Ishida. They leapt in opposite directions, circling around Hell. Dodging with high speed, Hell swiped at one of the wolves with Asahi no Kagami, only to see the wolf reform without being hindered in the slightest. After a few more moments, he found himself surrounded. With gritted teeth, he conjured his barrier again, and completely wrapped himself in it to keep from being bitten while he tried to think of another plan. Tsubaki. Koten Zanshuan. I reject. Hell blinked and twisted to look at the girl who was maintaining the curious oval-shaped barrier. He turned just in time to see a black-winged projectile of some sort pierce through his barrier like it wasn't even there. And much to his shock, the barrier completely collapsed an instant later. Just as several wolves attached themselves to Hell's limbs and began to glow, Ishida threw a silver vial at Hell. A silver rod strikes the five-fingered stone bed, grits. A large stone prison materialized around Hell and the wolves. Ichigo raised his left arm and concentrated hard, summoning a large length of chains that he promptly directed to wrap around the grits, reinforcing it. It was not a moment too soon either, as the grits practically disintegrated under the force of the explosion of several wolves. The chains went a few instants later, but it was enough to redirect most of the remaining force upwards, utterly shattering the Soten Kishun. Inoue promptly collapsed onto her Santen Keshin, and even that technique was beginning to fracture. Orihime. Ishida. Cried out, and quickly appeared next to her with a burst of Harenkyaku. The Santen Keshin shattered as well, but Chad had already picked her up in his arms. Inoue, are you alright? Chad asked. I'm okay, Yuryu, Sato-kun. She muttered. Just tired. Sorry. Don't worry, Hatchi declared calmly as he approached with Neliel and Ulquiorra just a few steps behind. She's just used a lot of Ryuryoku. A bit of healing Kido and she'll be back on her feet. Hatchi, Ichigo's voice drifted back towards them as the smoke from the explosion began to dissipate. Good job on closing the portal. Take care of Inoue, and when she's able, you two should work on getting the living world's ratio back to normal. Inoue. His voice softened. Thanks for your help. If it weren't for your Soten Kishun, Hell's illusions would have made things a lot more difficult. Inoue smiled, and then let exhaustion take her, passing out. Chad passed her to Hatchi, who nodded and vanished in a burst of Shuinpa. I'll admit, that nearly killed me, Hell said as the smoke finished clearing. His clothes were little more than rags, but he seemed completely unharmed otherwise. But you really shouldn't have given me time to heal. Ichigo grit his teeth. It had been a calculated risk to leave Hell alone in the smoke. Inoue had needed immediate attention, and without her barriers insulating the fight, further use of the powerful techniques needed to finish Hell off endangered the living world. Ichigo had figured that Hell was taking the time to heal properly, but the wizard had wanted to give Zeni his opportunity to get that portal open. Come on. He muttered impatiently. Orders, my liege. Ulquiorra asked quietly. Ichigo shook his head. He had made his decision to put his trust in Zeni. He needed to stall for time. Well, he might as well get some answers. Aizen had certainly liked to monologue, maybe Hell would too. He exited Resurrection and removed his mask to conserve his power for when the fighting would begin again. So, Hell, tell me, does the name Aayumu mean anything to you? Hell's face betrayed nothing. There have been many people called by that name. Is there one in particular you wanted to know about? Ichigo. Chad muttered. What are you doing? In a minute, Chad. How about one that's friends with a guy named Akio? Hell's eyes narrowed. You had some discussions about the nature of the human soul, about the balance between conflict and peace, and how to punish souls that were evil in life. Ichigo pressed, his suspicions leaping to the fore at seeing Hell's reaction. Has it been so long that you can't remember those days with your best friend? Has it been so long since you remembered your dream, Aayumu? Hell's face closed off, denying any semblance of emotion in his expression. So, you know. How? I've been having these dreams, reliving these memories, your memories. Ichigo yelled. I don't know how your memories got into my head. All I know is that you dreamt of turning the hearts of men, and bringing lasting peace to all the worlds, he roared angrily. Look at you now. Akio taught you how to open the world of your heart to rehabilitate the wicked. And now you're a conqueror of worlds. I was a fool. Human nature cannot be denied, Aayumu retorted derisively. You cannot fathom how many souls I have communed with, how many lives I've witnessed, how much evil lies within the human spirit. Do not presume to judge me, Kurosaki Ichigo. When you have looked through 1,000,000 sets of eyes, lived 1,000,000 lives, only then will you know a fraction of what I have experienced. Do you think I care about that? Ichigo snapped. Akio warned you about the possible consequences. He told you that there was a chance that your world would just turn into a prison, and you its warden. Aayumu inclined his head slightly, conceding the point. Very true. But what Akio did not predict, was that I would learn to wholly understand the truth of humanity. The truth of humanity? Chad repeated, his own eyes narrowed. Yes. I had always known that humanity was flawed. I had always known that people's motivations weren't always pure and good, but I had always thought that if people could understand each other, could empathize with each other, then humanity could move past pointless violence, could learn to live together in peace and work together towards a better future. Humanity still wouldn't be perfect, but it would be better. So what went wrong? Ichigo asked quietly. At first, it wasn't so bad, Aayumu reminisced with an almost fond tone. Most would learn what they needed in order to live a peaceful life. Many of them just needed a friend, someone who understood them, someone they could confide in without judgment. It gave me hope. Of course, some were utterly unrepentant, some were bloodthirsty killers, some were, well, the irredeemable were many and varied. Them, I imprisoned within my realm for eternity. Eventually, I was sure, the only humans in the reincarnation cycle would be good ones at heart. But things never changed as time went on. The same stories, the same tragedies, the same evils kept repeating themselves in greater and greater numbers. I lost count of how many times, how many ways I checked to ensure that those evil souls had not escaped me, were not influencing others in any way. Ayumu's fists clenched with rage. They weren't. It was then that I figured it out. The truth of humanity. Sharing, empathy, caring, those are learned, and not everyone can grasp them, or even wants to. But greed, and pride, and selfishness is inherent within every human being. People justify their actions to make their hypocrisy more livable, to allow their own selfishness while dooming others for the same. All those years, I had been treating the symptoms, not the cause. Ayumu's face twisted into a smile that was utterly without mirth, a smile that sent a chill down Ichigo's spine. It was suddenly so clear what I had to do. I had to cut out the root of the problem, the part of humanity that leads us to temptation. But Akio refused. He claimed that to mutilate the human soul like that would leave them incapable of growing beyond what they were. He couldn't see that there was no point, all the so-called growth of humans, the stories remained the same. RPE. Murder. Torture of the mind, of the body, of the spirit. Desperate acts of desperate men. Aayumu flared his ryatsu, turning murderous eyes upon the people before him. These crimes against fellow man and woman have existed since the beginning, and they happen today. Why is it that with this bountiful planet, you have people dying of hunger and others of gluttony? Why is it that with this giant world, you have men with enough land to house 100 comfortably, and others who are forced to live with no home? Why is it that those with the resources and intelligence to cure terrible disease refuse to unless they can make a profit? If you humans had truly grown, you would have begun to understand one another. If you humans had truly grown, you wouldn't be so enamored with power, he roared, increasing his ryatsu output immensely with his anger. Ichigo nearly swallowed his tongue as the enormous pressure hit him. He hadn't been prepared for it, he'd thought that he wouldn't be able to feel Ayumu's ryatsu, since Ayumu's Ryuryoku was more evolved than his own. So, either Ichigo had grown more transcendent, enough to be able to feel Aayumu, or... Ichigo took a moment to glance at his companions. Given their grimaces, Ichigo realized that Aayumu had lowered his ryatsu to a level that anyone could feel it. Ichigo returned his gaze to Aayumu, who was calming down. Surely you can see the same truth I do. Humans are a selfish, flawed species that can never, will never achieve paradise on their own. Your own nature fights you. I want to change that. That is the reason I fight, that is the reason I am here. His voice softened, taking on a reassuring, almost pleading tone. Join me, and I will help you. I will remove those parts of you that can conceive of evil. I will help you achieve world peace, eliminate all crime. Imagine a world where people understand each other, where people no longer judge and scheme against each other, where war and hate have no meaning, where despair is a foreign concept. Help me, and I swear to you I will help you. Hearing the sincerity in Aayumu's plea, Ichigo's lips and throat went dry. Such a world, it sounded almost perfect. But, something about the offer just seemed wrong somehow. Ichigo. Chad seemed at a loss for words. Ichigo looked at him with equally conflicted eyes, and finally Chad seemed to gather his words. What he's saying, it reminds me of my abuelo. He always encouraged me to use my arms to protect others. Chad turned to address Aayumu. You would take away my desire to hurt others, right? Exactly. But I channel that desire into my left arm, and I've used it to protect others. What is better? To be born perfect, or overcome your flawed nature through great effort? Aayumu was visibly startled by the question, but before he could formulate a response, Stark jumped in. I remember being alone. So terribly alone, because the strength of my power killed those who came close to me. I remember cursing my strength, lamenting not being weak. But Aayumu, that loneliness has helped me to treasure the friends I have found. So I do not regret my years of loneliness, for now I know the true value of companionship. Ulquiorra didn't even give Aayumu the chance to look at the former Primera. I have known true despair. That crushing, overwhelming feeling was not pleasant, but through it, and my conversations with others, I am beginning to comprehend hope, and why humans treasure it. I still do not understand the human heart, but I feel that if I am given time, one day I will. I don't like fighting, Neliel said quietly. I never have. A world where we don't need to fight, where people understand each other, your world is tempting. But when I fought under Aizen, I learned to treasure the people I had come to hold as family. Yes, they were different, as I must have been to them. But we loved each other all the more for it, because we had come to understand each other. Can't you see, Aayumu? We grew close through trying circumstances that wouldn't exist in your world, and I wouldn't trade Dondachaka and Pesh for anything. I harbor hate in my heart, Ishida admitted calmly, steadily. Hate for a man who used his power to have my grandfather killed, and then tortured his soul. I have to remind myself of the potential consequences of killing him every time I even think his name. But if you remove the ability to hate, then you cheapen the gift of love, of forgiveness. You take away the ability for a human to make meaningful choices. Like Sado Kun said, it is our flawed nature that gives our actions worth. His resolve restored, Ichigo pointed Tensa Zangetsu at Aayumu accusingly. This is what Akio meant when he talked about growing beyond what we were. Our experiences, the things we've learned, we pass them on to our children, and our children's children. You say that humans haven't grown? That we cannot learn to understand each other? Look at the world below you. Human civilization has grown so far past what we used to be. The people of this world have never been more connected, so don't you dare claim that we lack empathy. Yes, we still have problems, but what you could never accept is that it is our imperfection that gives our lives meaning. Are you alright? Zeni opened his eyes from where he was sitting cross-legged just in time to watch Masaki shoot yet another Togabito attempting to escape through the gates. They'd started coming in droves within minutes of the gates opening, but thus far Masaki had had no trouble at all dispatching them long before they ever got close. I'm fine. I'm just having trouble getting a portal established. Hell's still restricting that ability, and it doesn't help that I've never opened one myself. It can't be that different from opening a Garganta, Masaki commented with a frown. I mean, they're both rips in the fabric of space. Zeni shifted slightly. Yes and no. See, a garganta is an opening to the void between worlds, and from there you can go where you like. But these hell portals, they're more than that. It's a direct connection between two worlds. A sympathetic connection of similar energy. Like how water droplets attract each other, if they're close enough. The trick is getting them close enough for the attraction to happen. Masaki took a moment to survey whether any new Togabito was coming. Determining that they were safe for the moment, she sat in front of Zeni, curious. So, how do you do that? I have to sort of push the hell dimension's energy towards where I want to go. Problem is that there's a rubber band effect, the further out I push, the more it resists. But the living world is right there, Masaki pointed out, pointing at the open gates. Zeni nodded. Right, and that's the only reason I'm making progress at all. Hell's making it very difficult to open a portal from here. I could probably make a portal from the living world to this dimension in a heartbeat, but going the other way's not easy when I'm going directly against the ruler's will. Masaki turned that over in her head for a moment, before nodding in understanding. Am I distracting you too much? Not really. I'm pretty close to the connection, but I need a few minutes to recover more power from hell anyway to make the last push. Zeni gestured towards his chains. Only good thing about these chains, I can passively drain him of power. Without shifting from her sitting position, or even looking away from Zeni, Masaki created an arrow and shot at Togabito who was making a sprint for the exit. So, I don't suppose you're going to tell me what part of Ichigo you are. Since Ichigo apparently has figured it out and all, telling me no longer risks whether he'll accept you back. Zeni gave her the saddest smile Masaki had ever seen, and she could feel her heart twist on seeing it. Are you sure you want to know? The answer will do you no favors, he warned. By learning this truth, you will see a dark side to Ichigo, one that he now knows he must live with for the rest of his life. I know he would rather it be kept quiet. But I also know that if you asked him, he would tell you. That is the only reason I am even considering telling you. Masaki was quiet for a minute. Will knowing allow me to help my son? Yes, but not in the way you think. Zeni shook his head. Ichigo knows what I am. That means he knows himself that much more. What he does with that knowledge, is up to him. But if you know what I am, and can acknowledge and love him still, then that would be the greatest gift you could ever give him. He let another smile, wistful this time, cross his face. It might even be enough to banish the rain permanently. Masaki blinked, completely thrown off by the last comment. Huh? Rain? Zeni shook his head, refusing to expand on the topic. If I tell you this secret, you will have the power to support Ichigo, or utterly destroy him. Masaki smiled back at Zeni as she finally understood what he was doing. You're trying to protect him, aren't you? That's the real reason why you're explaining all this. It's so I don't just ask Ichigo, and hurt him. The Togabito chuckled. Yeah. You're definitely perceptive when you know what to look for. His face sobered, then, and he fixed Masaki with a piercing look. So, do you want me to tell you? Masaki shook her head negatively and stood. I will always love my son. I would never purposely hurt him unless it was unavoidable. And I do want to know, but... She smiled down at Zeni. My Ichigo's all grown up. I need to trust that he'll tell me the important things, when he's ready for me to know. Whatever you are, he trusts you enough to entrust my care to you, don't even try denying it. I saw the look you two shared, she scolded when Zeni opened his mouth to interrupt. I wasn't going to deny it, Zeni replied quietly. I was going to say thank you. Masaki went very still. There was something very final about his tone. Zeni. What's wrong? When Ichigo gets here, tell him that I was glad I could work with him one last time, Zeni continued, ignoring Masaki's question. It felt good to work together without even trying. To be completely understood and accepted. It reminded me of when we were one. Zeni, you are not going to die here, Masaki stated firmly, with as much authority as she could muster. No. I'm not. Zeni's smile held no mirth, just a bizarre combination of regret and satisfaction. I'm not surprised you haven't noticed. He lifted one arm, and Masaki saw, to her confusion, that the wrist where chains had dangled only a few minutes before, were completely bare. Hell's released me. He must have noticed I was draining him more than usual. But, that's a good thing, isn't it? Masaki cried out. That means he doesn't have any control over you anymore. Have you forgotten? I relied on the influx of Ryuryoku from Hell to exist once Ichigo rejected me. Now that Hell's not providing any more Ryuryoku, I no longer have a strong enough soul attached to me to support my continued existence. I'm going to fade away in a few minutes. You're a Quincy. You should be able to feel my form destabilizing. With wide eyes, Masaki realized that she could indeed feel that very thing happening. But won't that mean you'll return to Ichigo's soul? Zeni shook his head no. We never rejoined, he said simply. My consciousness will dissipate. The part of Ichigo's soul I harbor will probably go back to him, but me. Zeni chuckled depreciatingly. It doesn't matter. This body, this personality, it is merely a manifestation, a collection of Ichigo's desires and motivations. My death isn't really the right word, is it? My existence ending won't hurt Ichigo at all, so don't worry about that. Masaki was struck by Zeni's expression, then. Never had Zeni more resembled her son than in that moment, and in that instant it really hit her that Zeni was Ichigo. A manifestation, a collection of Ichigo's desires and motivations. She echoed, her eyes widening in shock. All Ichigo's ever wanted is to. You are. Zeni graced her with the tiniest of knowing smiles. Figured it out, have you? Masaki stared at him as the dots connected. So, that's the reason you've been protecting me all along. It was never really about how Ichigo hurt you at all. It was never about becoming one with him again. You had no ulterior motive, you just wanted to protect me. That's what you meant when you said that you had your pride, that you remembered where you came from. Yep. It would have been nice to go back to being one with Ichigo, but it simply wasn't as important as you are. All those fights with Ichigo. Those were just to get him as ready as I could. It was only towards the end that I began to hope that maybe we would actually end up one again. Zeni laughed bitterly. We just have rotten luck, I guess. Ichigo finally understands me, finally accepts me, but there just wasn't time. Oh well. The soul fragment got to his feet with some difficulty. What are you doing? Masaki asked, still stunned by the revelation. Opening the portal. You're gonna want to move back a bit. I'll be gone in a minute, but I'll be dead if I don't help against Hell. Zeni raised his arms above his head and tensed, gathering the remains of his energy. Oh no you don't. Masaki ordered. Sternly. Don't try and stop me. Zeni yelled at her. This has to be done and you know it. Get back, and hide. No. Masaki stepped forward and placed a hand over Zeni's heart. You need power to continue existing, right? In case you've forgotten, I'm a Quincy. More than that, you are my son. You will survive. Masaki began to glow bright blue, and Zeni watched, awestruck, as she began absorbing more and more erasure from around her. And then Zeni felt Ryuryoku enter him, felt his form begin to stabilize. But, how? Did you think Shinigami were the only ones who could give Ryuryoku to others? Masaki answered with a smirk. Or perhaps you thought that Quincy's could only take it? Well, Masaki shook her head and smiled at him. I promise you, Zeni. You will survive to rejoin Ichigo. Now open the portal. Zeni was quiet for a moment, and then he began to laugh. We never really had a chance, did we? He couldn't help but say, still laughing. Between you and Dad, There just was no avoiding that stubborn compulsion to help and protect everyone. Alright then. I hope you're ready for this, Ichigo. And with a monumental effort, he opened the portal above them both. So, you have made your decision. Aayumu had looked troubled, but now resolve was the only thing visible in his eyes. Very well. I shall have to, what? Aayumu whirled in shock as a wide portal unexpectedly opened right behind him. What the? Now, everyone! Ichigo roared, ripping on his mask and gathering power in his left hand. We've got to push him through. The sounds of everyone using their techniques at once overlapped each other. But Ichigo flashed into motion, dashing alongside the attacks. He knew that Aayumu would use his barrier to weather the assault. The only way to get Aayumu back to hell was to drag him there himself. The attacks hit a shimmering barrier. As Ichigo expected, Aayumu managed to get his technique up in time. And also as he expected, Aayumu was completely unprepared for chains to envelop him, barrier and all, a moment later. With a massive yank, Ichigo pulled Aayumu after him into hell. The moment Aayumu crossed the threshold, Ichigo dissipated the chains and let Aayumu's momentum send him flying deeper into hell. Ichigo twisted around to see the portal close a moment later, with his friends just shy of making it. Removing his mask, he shunpaed to where he could sense Zeni, only to see him collapsed on the ground, panting as Masaki tended to him with glowing hands. The demand that Ichigo had been prepared to make died in his throat. Zeni used everything he had to keep that portal open for as long as it took. It was just bad luck that no one else had managed to make it in. Ichigo, he's on the verge of dying, Masaki quickly told him. He's got to rejoin the rest of your soul or he'll just cease to exist. Ichigo nodded sharply. Alright, Zeni. Make it quick, hell will back in a moment. With effort, Zeni got to his feet and drew Zangetsu. You know how this goes, right? Ichigo snorted. Seeing Zeni's grip tremble with lack of strength, Ichigo gently helped raise Zeni's blade to his heart. Masaki gasped, but they ignored her as, together, they pushed Zangetsu into his heart. There was no pain. There couldn't be. Zeni and his version of Zangetsu began to dissolve as his spirit returned to Ichigo's heart. Zeni could not help but smile. I'm home. Ichigo smiled back. Ah. Welcome home. Let's protect everyone together. Zeni nodded, and then his form was no more. You know, you and your friends have become very, very annoying, Aayumu's voice growled as he appeared a short distance away. Not only did you succeed in bringing me back here, but your friends have managed to shore up the gates enough to temporarily seal the hole you made in them. That woman is naturally going to reverse the ratio resonance as well, meaning days more work recreating it. Ichigo smirked, pleased at that news. Good to hear. Of course, she'll need time to reverse it. And strong as they are, your friend's reinforcements to the gates are temporary and not sufficient to keep me here permanently. Once you're out of the way, I can break them at my leisure. Well, that just means I should finish with you first, Ichigo replied calmly, reaching for his hollow power. He was engulfed in black Ryatsu for a few moments before it faded, revealing him in his resurrection once more. Humph. Let's see if you can. Chapter 76, To Destroy a God. Blood flew in countless directions as screams tore through the air. The ash skeletons were without pain, without remorse, without mercy as they continued to rip through the army of Togabito that hell had summoned. Some of the ash skeletons had been destroyed, but there were simply too many for the Togabito to handle. The ones with the best success were those who had powerful enough ranged attacks, but Yamamoto knew that they too would perish shortly. Hell had done little but run, avoiding Yamamoto's every technique. It was highly annoying, Yamamoto had to admit. Hato 58, Tenran, he barked, spinning Zenka no Tachi and unleashing a massive blast of fire, strengthened even more by the tornado-like blast of wind. As expected, hell vanished from the area just before fire turned all the sand in that area to ash, and Yamamoto followed him as quickly as he could. Hell was consistently just a bit faster than him. It vaguely reminded Yamamoto of Shihoin Yoruchi's favorite training game, Ho-Ho Tag. He had witnessed Yoruchi and a young Kuchiki Byakuya at that game frequently before Yoruchi had been banished. Disturbingly, he realized, that put Yamamoto in the position of Kuchiki. Well, that wouldn't do. It was time to change tactics. He had to either make the whole battlefield harmful to Hell, which wasn't practical, since Yamamoto's Ryuryoku did have a limit at some point and he needed to conserve some for sealing Hell, or he had to lure Hell into a trap. He frowned in consideration, absently throwing another concentrated slash of fire at Hell to keep him occupied. Perhaps a large Tazancho. It would certainly limit the battlefield, but Yamamoto doubted that he could catch Hell in it. A continuous onslaught of Hyaparankan? No, it was too easy to dodge. A collection of Tsuruboshi, with a tweak to make the material a trap. No, not enough sturdy objects to attach to. But perhaps. Yamamoto let out a fierce grin. Quite suddenly, Hell realized he couldn't sense Yamamoto anymore. He paused for a moment and looked around. The ash skeletons were still present. Slaughtering his army, so Yamamoto wasn't dead. But the heat from his presence was gone. His Ryatsu seemed to have disappeared entirely. And Hell couldn't see him anywhere. Had Yamamoto actually retreated from the battlefield? Hell frowned. No, that made no sense. Yamamoto was completely dominating this so-called fight. Hell hadn't even managed to land a single blow on him, and Asahi no Kagami had been quite damaged by his heat aura. Why would Yamamoto retreat? Perhaps he was running low on Ryuryoku? Or perhaps he was hiding, waiting for an opportunity since it was obvious that Hell could evade all of Yamamoto's attacks. Hell nodded to himself thoughtfully. Yes, that last one made sense. No point in wasting Ryuryoku when it served no purpose. If this became a battle of attrition, Hell had the advantage, and both of them knew it. So Yamamoto had to be hiding somewhere nearby, waiting for Hell to let his guard down. Hell extended his senses, trying to work out where the old man had gone. Not there, nor there, not over there either. DMN Yamamoto, Hell grumbled. Not enough to have a godlike Bankai and powerful spells, no. He just had to branch out, just had to master invisibility as well. Wouldn't surprise me if he had some ultimate seal too. Yamamoto silently cancelled his invisibility spell, Kyako, from right behind Hell. Well, since you asked, Q Shirbari. Hell flinched for the barest of moments, but it was enough for 8 black holes to materialize around him, paralyzing him long enough for a 9th to appear in his chest. Rikujikoro, Seijo Sabaku, Yamamoto cast almost absently, further binding Hell with another 2 powerful Bakudo. Hell swore under his breath as he struggled to shake off the spells. He really shouldn't have tempted fate. Yamamoto smiled tightly, but placed a hand over Hell's head and began the incantation. Limit of the 1,000 blades, dutiful blades, unable to slay the enemy. The darkness of the void, the concept of fear, the absence of reason when they meet, come forth. Hell's eyes widened as complete darkness fell upon them. There was nothing to see, nothing to hear, nothing at all beyond Yamamoto and himself. He fell silent, studying the technique, looking for flaws even as he awaited the inevitable. Immortal body, absolute restraint, the wheel of time halts. With pure purpose I declare. Boidoburedo Kugio. Hell cried out as invisible, immaterial sword stabbed into him in all of his wrists, his ankles, his elbows and knees, all of joints in short succession, and then right next to his heart. A terrible cold rushed through his system, and abruptly he realized he could not move at all. Not even his jaw or his tongue would respond to him. How could a god of fire possibly be able to use such deathly cold? Then he realized, the frost in his veins was not from Yamamoto's Ryuryoku. It was from his own. You must have guessed it by now, Yamamoto said quietly. Boidoburedo Kugio, the void blade penance. The sword in your chest has penetrated your Hakusui, the source of your power, but did not damage it. Your body will now generate merely enough Ryuryoku to keep the seal intact and your body alive, but as it has been touched by the seal, your Ryuryoku will not respond to you. No, that is not quite correct. Your soul doesn't even recognize it as your Ryuryoku any longer. You're thinking of escape options, I'm sure, Yamamoto continued with the same quiet confidence. You're thinking that if the sword in your chest is destroyed, then since your Hakusui is undamaged you'll be able to use your own Ryuryoku to destroy the remaining bindings. Did you think that even touching the Hakusui would not have consequences? The blade has entered your Hakusui, merged with it to an extent. If the seal is destroyed, then so too will your Hakusui be destroyed. If you are merely a soul fragment, as I believe, then you require a constant source of Ryuryoku to survive. This is why the Kusanada, your soul fragments, constantly ate Togabito yet never grew any stronger. They needed more energy to exist than their Hakusui could provide, if they had Hakusui at all. So for you, losing your Hakusui is tantamount to ceasing to exist. I do not know if you would reincarnate here in your world in such a case, nor do I know if your Hakusui would recover in that reincarnation, Yamamoto admitted. However, the point is moot, as I have left you unable to move in any conceivable way. I sentence you to eternal penance in the void. Live, hell, and repent your sins. Yamamoto fell silent, and hell was left alone in the absolute void. Yamamoto looked upon his work as he stepped out of his seal and nodded to himself in satisfaction. It had taken the shape of a sword, twice as large as hell had been, whose color constantly shifted between very dark purple and black. Yamamoto picked it up by the hilt and nodded to himself. The seal was stable. Now the only thing to do was to hide it somewhere, and catch up with Kurosaki. If the young man had not returned by now, there surely was something wrong. Masaki breathed deeply, gathering more and more erasure from her surroundings as her Quincy powers recovered with greater and greater speed. Only a minute or two longer, and she'd be able to support her son in the fight against hell. For the moment, she watched them clash, trying to analyze both fighters' strengths and weaknesses. Masaki watched Ichigo swing his blade, wrought in black fire, into hell's barrier, cracking it. Ichigo had two primary strengths, his speed, and the sheer power he possessed. His weakness, however, was in how straightforward he was in fighting. There didn't seem to be a strategy to his movements beyond, get to the opponent, defend against his attacks, and cut him down with all my strength. Ichigo didn't seem to be maneuvering hell into a corner, or setting up for a powerful technique or anything like that. Then again, hell's barrier was truly an annoyance, Masaki decided as hell repaired it with a gesture. Any strategy that they could concoct would depend on being able to break that barrier, or this battle had been lost before it had truly begun. Ichigo was performing the valuable if unenviable task of determining what it would take to get past that barrier. If they couldn't, then, well, normally the smart thing to do would be to retreat and get help, additional weapons, something that could make the difference. But that wasn't really an option this time. They had to stay and fight until hell was sealed, or until the gates fully repaired themselves. Otherwise, hell would invade the living world again. Coward! Ichigo roared. Quit hiding behind that barrier and attack me. And open myself up for you to kill me? Hell retorted with a raised eyebrow. No thank you. Ichigo growled and raced towards Hell with all the speed he could muster. Hell brought up a hand, obviously channeling more power to his barrier to handle the next assault, but this time Ichigo didn't strike directly. He raced past Hell and twisted around in midair, preparing a zero between his horns even as he flung a Getsuga Tensho at his opponent. The Getsuga slammed into the barrier, prompting a scoff from Hell. It won't work. You'll never pierce this barrier. You want piercing power? Then try this on for size. Ichigo shoved his left claw forward, but instead of the crimson light of a zero, electricity crackled at his end of his index and middle fingers. Hado 4, Byakurai. A bolt of blue-white lightning shot forward and impacted the barrier with the strength of an angry god. In an instant, the barrier shattered and the lightning lunged for its prey, carving a hole in Hell's shoulder about an inch wide. Hell stared at Ichigo in complete disbelief for a few moments, before his expression turned cold. I see. And then he flashed into high-speed movement, dashing right for Masaki. Ichigo swore and sped after him, making it just in time for Tensa Zangetsu to block Asahi no Kagami from reaching Masaki. How dare you, he whispered harshly, his hollow double tone making his voice sound even more menacing than it would otherwise. He channeled a Getsuga down Tensa Zangetsu, and Hell broke the deadlock and leapt back to avoid being hit. You fought to ensure justice and peace for all souls. How dare you attack my mother? You young fool, Hell retorted. It's simple enough. I kill her, and that gives me a bargaining chip with which to control you. For the sake of recreating humanity, I will commit any evil. You're just like Aizen, Ichigo snarled. Neither of you ever could figure out that the right path to peace didn't involve becoming that which you were fighting. Do you think your words move me? Hell answered coldly. I know that there will be no place for me in the new world. Do not think me such a fool that I cannot see the consequences of my own actions. Then you should be aware of the consequences you've just brought on yourself, Ichigo spat, flaring his Ryatsu angrily. Back there, I was feeling pretty sympathetic. But now I just don't care. You tried to kill my mother. I will kill you, that's a promise. Masaki calmly stepped next to Ichigo, her own blue-white Ryatsu clearly visible next to his black and red. She had finally fully recovered her power, and she was ready to fight. With a simple gesture, she conjured her Quincy bow and an arrow. You may be a god. But there is one thing that even gods should not dare to invoke lightly, a mother's wrath. To try to kill my son right in front of me, you've awakened my anger. Quincy and hollow pointed arrow and sword at Hell accusingly. To raise your sword against my family. They cried out together, is unforgivable. Ichigo leapt at Hell, black fire engulfing not only his blade but his entire arm as it traveled up Tensa Zangetsu's chains. Hell's eyes widened for a split second even as he created another barrier, but it stood no chance to Ichigo's rage. Tensa Zangetsu carved through the barrier like hot butter, and Hell was forced to defend with Asahi no Kagami. Roaring a battle cry, Ichigo pressed forward, using his monstrous strength to swing his Bankai blade strongly enough to send Aayumu flying. He immediately took aim with his horns and swiftly charged his power. Zero. Hell grit his teeth and created yet another barrier to block the crimson ray of destruction, but a voice to his right sent a chill down his spine. Licht Regen. That was all the warning Hell received before Masaki unleashed a storm of innumerable arrows. The barrier had had most of its power focused to the front to block the Zero, and was therefore no match for the unexpected assault. The barrier shattered in its entirety, and abruptly Hell was engulfed by the Zero and the swath of arrows. When the Zero faded, Hell's corpse fell to the ground. Ichigo materialized next to Masaki in a burst of sonido. He's dead, he observed calmly as the body disintegrated. Yes. Sorry, Ichigo. I know he has to stay alive to be sealed. It's all right. He'll be back shortly. How do you know? What if it takes him a year to come back? Ichigo shook his head. No, he'll be back in a matter of minutes, if not seconds. Remember how I told you about Cazador? When he beat me in my inner world, I came back within a day, and that was when I didn't know what I was doing. Aayumu, that's Hell's real name, will pull himself together much faster than I did. Perceptive. Ichigo and Masaki turned to the side, where Aayumu was brushing himself off. Are you ready to continue? What do you mean, no? Rukia, followed closely by Renji, the Vizard and Ichigo's Arrancar allies, steadfastly glared at Yoruchi. She was nervous, arguing against the goddess of Flash, but she refused to let it show. Exactly what I said, Yoruchi told her with narrowed eyes. You can't go through the gates to help Ichigo. She raised a hand to forestall the inevitable demands to know why, and gestured towards the still manifested gates of Hell, where Hatchi and Tessai were working together, maintaining a very powerful barrier to cover the large hole that Ichigo had blasted. The gates are damaged to the point where Hell, or Aayumu, or whatever his real name is, can escape here to the living world. If we weaken our barriers enough for you to go through, then that's an opportunity for Hell to escape, and we can't risk that. We got lucky that Ichigo was able to drag him back to the Hell dimension, and we can't count of him being able to do it again. Renji clenched his fists. Surely there's some way we can help him. Yoruchi jerked her thumb over her shoulder, where Urahara was working feverishly, setting up a machine. Kisuke is working on a way to communicate with everyone. Until we have contact, the most we can do is prepare for the worst. Oi! Kisuke! How are you doing over there? Almost done. Kisuke grunted, connecting a few wires and attaching what looked like a satellite dish to the top. With a singular movement, he aimed the dish right at the gates of Hell. There. Now let's power it up. He vanished for a few seconds and then reappeared with a black box with a few cords dangling from it. He attached one of them to the machine in a previously unseen slot, and nodded to himself when the machine began to whir and hum. Okay. Next step, connect to the right frequency. He muttered, and twisted a few dials. And, there. Grabbing a microphone that he'd left on top of the machine, he spoke directly into it. This is Urahara Kisuke from the living world. I am remotely powering your communication devices. All units in Hell, respond with your current status. This is Soifan Taicho. I am with everyone save Yamamoto Soteicho and Kurosaki. We have secured the site that Togabito were using to attack the living world. However, we are under siege by an unending number of Togabito. Do you have injured? Urahara asked quickly. No. Kotetsufu Koteicho has performed her role of healer admirably. Good. How long can you hold the site? There was silence for a few moments. A few hours more, came the answer. Then we'll have to finish it before then. Yamamoto Soteicho, can you hear me? I am here. Kurosaki and I separated when we encountered Hell. Did he escape with his mother? Urahara furrowed his brows. When he emerged from the Hell dimension, his mother was not with him, he denied. But he is currently fighting Hell on the first level of the dimension. Did he escape you? No. I sealed the Hell I fought. It is as I suspected, Hell's soul fragments have not reunited into a single being yet. He must have combined enough to create a second avatar. That explains the weakness of the one I sealed. Kurosaki, status? There was a pause. Like Urahara said, we're fighting him on the first level. We just killed him again, but he'll be back any second. Why are you killing him? Soifan barked. You know perfectly well that he must be sealed. Of course we know that. But Aayumu obviously knows that too, because he started putting himself in positions where if we break his protective barrier then he dies. It's very annoying. Who is Aayumu? And why are you speaking with the royal we? Aayumu is Hell's original name, I'm using it so people don't get confused between person and dimension. And it should be obvious that I'm not fighting alone. My mother and I are fighting together. Turns out she's a Quincy. Who knew? There was complete silence for a few seconds, and then everyone in the living world was treated to the sight of Ishida Yuryu calmly approaching a sturdy wall and proceeding to bang his head into it repeatedly. I would ask that you keep that a secret as long as possible, Yamamoto's voice said, with only a hint of exasperation. If Kuratsuchi Taicho finds out, then I can see no scenario where he does not commit suicide by Kurosaki. Shinji instantly looked expectantly at Rose and Kensei, who begrudgingly reached into their pockets and gave him some cash. Seeing the various Shinigami give him strange looks, he only smiled more widely. Don't worry, Yamamoto Soteicho, Urahara reassured him. I will edit the recordings of your earpieces to omit her being a Quincy. Thanks. Oh, Aayumu's back. We could use some help, though. I'm on my way. You know, being able to hear them is good and all, but isn't there some way we can see what's going on? Shinji asked Urahara. Perhaps. Let me see if my old student did as I suspect. Urahara opened a compartment of his machine, revealing a small screen and a keyboard. He typed at it for a few seconds, and then nodded. As I thought. The devices he gave them also have a forward-facing video camera. I can tap into it, but I need something to display with. He nodded again, and vanished. Several seconds later, he reappeared with another small device, connecting it to a port next to the screen. His fingers flew across the keyboard, and then the latest device he'd hooked up began to project several videos against the wall. Now to isolate the feeds we want. The number of videos displayed reduced to 2, and the remaining images enlarged to rectangles, each 3 meters wide by 2 meters tall. Urahara nodded, satisfied with his handiwork. There we go. The one on the right is from Ichigo's feed, the one on the left is Yamamoto Sotecho. Sound is enabled as well, so you should be able to hear everything they're saying. It had been little over a minute since Shinji had asked Urahara to see what was happening in hell. He shook his head in admiration. Say what you will about him, but that mad scientist gets things done, he muttered even as he joined the others to watch the feeds. Ichigo was apparently looking at Aayumu, but his mother was caught on camera as well, being a few feet ahead of him and to the side. Mom! Appearing apparently out of nowhere, Karen and Yuzu raced to see the display better. Then Yuzu stiffened, seeing the other person on the screen. Karen, is that? Karen's eyes went white for a moment, and then she nodded. Yes, that's hell. His soul's not whole, but that's definitely hell. So that's hell, Isshin mused, following his children at a slightly more sedate pace. Behind him were the Kasumiichi group. Masaki and Ichigo are fighting him, then, he asked Urahara. The scientist nodded. Yamamoto Sotecho will be joining them shortly. Why are you here? This is the safest place to be, Isshin said simply. Everyone here is an ally of my son. There's no safer place for his sisters. The Kasumiichi, I assume, are of similar mind. Kenryu and Enryu nodded firmly once to affirm the statement. Rurikayo's eyes were very wide. Kurosaki-sama has this many powerful allies. Hi, Rurikayo-sama, Kenryu confirmed. If you are safe from Komoi anywhere, you are safe here. Do you understand now why we sought Kurosaki-sama's protection? Rurikayo could only nod, completely in awe. Then she noticed something. So, where is Kurosaki-sama? That's him, Karen told her, pointing at Yamamoto's feed. He had just arrived, and clearly in sight was both Masaki and Ichigo's hollow form. Her eyes flashed white again, and she grimaced. Ichigo's getting frustrated. Hell's strategy is working, he's wearing Ichigo down, little by little. Isshin knelt down and looked Karen in the eyes. Anything else you can tell us? Karen met her father's gaze, and then nodded resolutely. She turned back to look at Hell and her eyes turned white once again, but this time they did not turn back. Hell has to maintain a constant effort to control the barrier around him, and if any part of the barrier is destroyed, it all goes down. The barrier appears to be no less than 20 centimeters from his body. His weapon has 2 uses remaining. Before it needs recharging. What about your mother? And your brother? Mom. Karen smiled as she looked at her. Mom's doing fine. She's very determined to help Ichigo, and is completely focused on the fight. She knows that Ichigo will protect her, just as Ichigo knows that she will protect him. She's got a technique going, something to improve her defense, something to do with her blood. She's confident in it. Blood Vene, Ishida supplied, approaching. It's a Quincy technique. By channeling Raisher directly into one's veins, a Quincy can withstand blows that would otherwise kill a human. Its effectiveness varies by user. Your mother's blood Vene was, well, exceptional. It wouldn't surprise me if she could take a direct hit from Hell and not be hurt a bit, Isshin assured his children. Wow. Mom's pretty powerful, isn't she? Yuzu asked her twin. Karen turned her eyes back to Hell. Yeah. She agreed softly. I just hope it's enough. Job will be to break the barrier and let Yamamoto Sotecho do the sealing. Got it? Got it, Ichigo confirmed, watching Yamamoto fight Aayumu. The Sotecho had, upon arrival, ordered him to take a rest and work out a plan with Urahara while Yamamoto kept him distracted. It was a break that Ichigo was glad to receive, as it gave him a chance to use his hollow nature to absorb some racier from his surroundings and refill some of his reserves. Thanks, Urahara. So what's the plan, Ichigo? Masaki asked quietly. We're setting up Yamamoto for the punchline. Ichigo powered down out of Resurrection and removed his mask, reverting to Bankai. He would have powered all the way back down to Shirkai, but he didn't want to give up the enhanced speed his Bankai gave him. Can you hide your presence, reduce your Ryatsu or something? Masaki nodded, and abruptly Ichigo could detect practically no Ryatsu from her. No problem. Ichigo allowed himself exactly 1 second to be jealous of his mother's ability to instantly hide her Ryatsu before taking a few moments to lower his as best he could. Okay. Let's move, we've got to find an appropriate sniping spot. After a quick look around and verifying that Hell wasn't watching them, Ichigo stepped into Shunpa, and felt Masaki follow with Hirenkyaku. Yamamoto allowed himself a tiny flicker of satisfaction as he saw the pair vanish. He slammed Ryujin Jaka into Ayumu's barrier again, allowing flames to engulf the two of them once again, purposely obscuring Ayumu's vision and hopefully inhibiting Ayumu's ability to sense anything beyond Yamamoto himself. Is this all you have? Aayumu asked, disappointed. How is it that you, a much more experienced Shinigami than Kurosaki, are unable to pierce my shield in any way? Is this really the most powerful Shinigami in Soul Society? You haven't begun to see my power yet, Aayumu, Yamamoto replied calmly. I was simply waiting for Kurosaki and his mother to be out of range. Bankai. Zenka no Tachi. Aayumu leapt back in caution, putting some distance between himself and the leader of Soul Society. Much better, he admitted. I was very nearly incinerated there. So this is the form that defeated my other self. Your barrier is quite strong, Yamamoto observed calmly. Able to handle even those flames. I wonder if it can handle this technique. He lunged at Hell, Zenka no Tachi ready to eradicate the barrier. Yamamoto carefully watched Hell's expression as he approached, and when Hell began to smirk he instantly changed course and instead ran just past Hell. Now, Kurosaki. On cue, an impossibly powerful arrow ripped through Hell's barrier like paper. But it was not aimed for Hell himself, but for a few centimeters away from Hell's torso. A quarter of a mile away, Masaki lowered her bow and smirked at her son. Barrier down. Ichigo couldn't help but smirk back as he moved Tensa Zangetsu away from her shoulder. Good. The idea had been simple, Ichigo had the power, Masaki had the accuracy. Just as Ichigo and Ishida had almost done against that first Minos Grande what felt like a lifetime ago, they could combine their strengths. With the barrier down, now everything depended on Yamamoto. And the old man was already in motion, firing what seemed to be all manner of binding Kido at Hell. Ropes, chains, bars of light, pillars falling from the sky, black holes, Yamamoto was conjuring anything and everything as fast as he could. The problem was that Aayumu was moving just as fast. He hadn't been disturbed in the slightest by his barrier failing, and was a blur of motion, using Asahi no Kagami to cut through Kido he couldn't dodge. By all appearance, the two appeared to be at a stalemate. Yamamoto was casting fast enough, strong enough that Aayumu couldn't take the time to create another barrier. But Aayumu wasn't letting anything hit him. Ichigo's eyes went wide. He saw his opportunity. Flickering into Shunpa and keeping his Ryatsu as low as he could, he drew the dagger that Kairaku had given him and began channeling his Ryuryoku into the blade. To Ichigo's utter satisfaction, Aayumu never saw him coming. The dagger broke the skin on Ayumu's back easily, and pierced the heart. Ichigo promptly threw the full might of his power into the dagger, willing the spell to do as it was designed, to shatter Aayumu's soul once again. Aayumu's mouth opened, and he spat out some blood before falling forward, falling off the dagger and collapsing onto the ground, dead. A second passed, then two, and then Aayumu's body disintegrated. Ichigo blinked and looked at the bloody dagger he now held. "Did it work?" he asked. "Also, why is it so damn hot?" "The heat is due to my Bankai, Kurosaki. Keep your distance, the closer you are to me, the hotter it is. The air closest to my skin is as hot as the sun itself. The fact that you are not merely ashes on the wind from that distance speaks well of your defense, but I would rather not test it further." Ichigo swallowed. "That's rather terrifying, actually. Thank you for not using it in the living world, then, when we were fighting Aizen." "Of course. As for whether the dagger worked, I do not know," Yamamoto admitted. "I expected something like him screaming in pain as his soul was forcibly torn apart, his whole body glowing and then hundreds of Kusanada appearing." "Me too. It's possible that his soul was split into so many pieces that the fragments could not form the Kusanada," Yamamoto mused. "Or it's possible that your spelled dagger did not work at all," an annoyed voice stated. Ichigo and Yamamoto turned to see Aayumu approaching, fully healed and his barrier already back up. "You fools. You cannot break a soul that lives on a higher plane than yourselves. Only a god can break a god. Do you really think you can stand beside the Rayo, that you could do as he did? Until you comprehend your soul's true nature, until you know what part of your soul you are, until you have become a god, you will never be able to break me." Chapter 77, Empathy. Scowls were clearly adorning nearly everyone's face at Aayumu's return. "He comes back quick," Shinji observed with narrowed eyes. "Why didn't the dagger work?" Kensei asked Urahara, clearly trying to wrap his mind around the idea that a spell existed that could tear a soul apart. Urahara opened his mouth to make an educated guess, but Karen beat him to it, her eyes of the oracle still active. Aayumu's Ryuryoku was able to resist Ichigo's because Aayumu is an existence that Ichigo doesn't comprehend. It's the same as why we can't sense Ichigo-kun's Ryatsu unless he allows us to, Urahara expanded. His soul has grown far enough down multiple paths that we truly cannot understand his existence unless we follow him down them. In the same way, how can we understand a man who became a god capable of creating his own world, of changing what happens when a soul dies? The only way to understand such a thing would be to follow his path and do so ourselves, or maybe to wield eyes such as Kurosaki-chan's. Everyone turned to look at Karen, who was steadfastly watching the feeds. "So, you guessed," she said quietly, then turned around and activated her power. Her eyes turned white once more as she gazed upon the people gathered. Karen stood her ground as nearly every person there was laid bare before her. She saw Rukia's quiet feeling of helplessness stemming from once again being unable to help the man who had taken her world and shaken it until it was something that Rukia had hardly dreamed possible. She saw Urahara's feeling of vindication that he'd gotten it right, and his curiosity to the limits of her power, if there even were any. She saw Shinji's mind putting the pieces together and contemplating how to use the knowledge. She saw her father's pride in her, saw him preparing to step in should they attempt to use another of his children. She saw so much that it was impossible to wrap her mind around it all. There was too much to see, too much for her to understand at once. The most she could do with this many subjects, unless she focused on individuals, was to see their current feelings and thoughts. Karen took a deep breath, steadying herself. "These eyes of mine, the eyes of the oracle, allow me to see the truth. Who you are, what you feel, your motivations, nothing is hidden from me if I turn my eyes on you. If there is something Aayumu is hiding, I will see it. I will help my brother in any way I can." Her gaze met Rurikayo's. "My powers do not lie in war. I don't have the strength to fight alongside my family. But I will make their burden as small as I can. If this is all I can do, then this is what I will do." The Kasumiyaji princess gave a small, gentle smile and the slightest of nods. Nothing needed to be said, Karen and Urahara understood each other perfectly. Seeing that, Karen turned around to watch hell once more, focusing the power of her eyes on her family's enemy. Yuzu, standing beside her as they watched Yamamoto and Ichigo face Aayumu, took her hand gently. Karen squeezed it, taking strength from her twin's presence. They were so different on the outside, she knew. But their hearts, their feelings were one. Yuzu was praying for the safety of Ichigo and their mom, and so was Karen. Any ideas? Ichigo asked Yamamoto, just loud enough for Yamamoto to hear him. Yamamoto remained silent for a moment, eyeing Aayumu critically. Have you improved your Bakudo? It appears I alone cannot catch him. Yeah, I've got a few Bakudo I can cast reliably. Mostly ones working with ropes or chains. That will be sufficient. This time, you engage and I will break the barrier. Then we will bind him together. Ichigo nodded resolutely. Bringing his hand up to his face, he ripped his mask into existence and reached for the well of hollow power within him. Black fire flowed swiftly up his body, and a second later he was in his resurrection form. Let's go then, he yelled, lunging for Aayumu as he charged Tensa Zangetsu with a Getsuga. It useless. Aayumu declared, dodging before flickering to another location several meters away. Then, just as Ichigo registered his new location, Aayumu flashed away again. And again. And again. Your strategy before relied on accurately piercing my barrier without killing me. As long as I move quickly enough, you will not succeed. And every time you kill me, I come back stronger. He's right, Urahara agreed, speaking to them with the interdimensional communicators. He's not a whole soul yet, but it appears he's recovered more of his soul during that last death you inflicted. Well, that's annoying. Ichigo commented, watching Hell carefully, looking for a pattern, for some hint of where he was going to be. So, you're relying on speed, then? And the idea that I don't have the speed, power and accuracy to do the job myself? Well, I'm sorry to tell you that you picked exactly the wrong opponent to try this with. How's that? You may have the power to break the barrier, but you'll have to catch me first. And you're not nearly fast enough. Surely you've noticed that my Bankai is not like other Shinigami. It compresses my power to increase my speed, strength, and Ryatsu. The more power I have, the greater the effect. There. Ichigo smirked behind his mask. He had the pattern now. So? Aayumu asked mockingly. You've been using your Bankai and your hollow powers this whole time. Have you suddenly learned how to use Quincy power-up techniques as well? Nothing like that, Ichigo admitted, bringing his left claw up to open his Bankai coat, exposing the two crescent moon seals over his heart, which were glowing black and white against his skin. Just a simple limiter seal. Let's see how you do against my real power. Genti Kaijo. As a pulse of black Ryatsu swept over the area, Aayumu paused for a brief instant to reevaluate his opinion of Ichigo's threat level. That instant was an instant too long, as Ichigo materialized right in front of Aayumu with a sonic boom, a Getsuga-enhanced Tensa Zangetsu already in motion to stab through the barrier. Aayumu barely managed to dodge to the side, flashing away, only to once again be cut off by Ichigo. This time, he deflected Ichigo's stab with Asahi no Kagami and lashed out with a kick, sending Ichigo back a few feet. I admit, I underestimated you. At my current strength, you will inevitably catch me and break the barrier. However, you have forgotten one thing. And what that? I recover more of my soul every time I meet my demise. And there is nothing stopping me from killing myself. In a single, swift motion, Aayumu flipped Asahi Kagami around and cut his own head off. Ichigo watched in stunned disbelief as Ayumu's corpse fell to the ground, bleeding for several seconds before disappearing. You have got to be kidding me, he muttered. This is like Aizen all over again. He tapped his communicator. Guys? Ideas? The other parts of his soul, the Kushinada, must be stored somewhere for easy slaughter, Urahara spoke quickly. His lieutenants are likely able to detect his death and are killing the counterattack within the timeframe for the soul fragments to rejoin. Soifun Taicho, Zaraki Taicho, you are to locate and eliminate the lieutenants, Yamamoto immediately ordered. Do not kill the counterattack if it can be avoided. Everyone else remain at the portal site. Hi. In the meantime, we'll just have to deal with Aayumu with whatever strength he's got now, Ichigo said with a groan. This is going to SCK. You have no idea, Aayumu agreed as he appeared before Ichigo once again. Now that I've seen your full strength, I am satisfied. With a little more training, I believe you could stand against the Ryo's guard. Now I need you out of the way for a while. He raised Asahi no Kagami, and it shone brightly for a moment. An instant later, Ichigo was once again surrounded by illusions. He immediately extended his senses, trying to locate Aayumu, but the King of Hell had apparently set his Ryatsu to its evolved state, making it impossible for Ichigo to sense him. Urahara. Where is he? He appears to have fled, with Yamamoto Soteicho and your mother in pursuit. I assume you have been hit by one of Ayumu's illusions. Break it, and then follow. Thoroughly fed up, Ichigo flared his Ryatsu. Enough of the goddamn illusions already. What more can you throw at me? You've already covered pride, trust, self-worth, guilt and betrayal. How can you condemn me for trying to do the same thing you are on a grander scale? Aayumu asked calmly. It was obviously an illusion, as it had no barrier shimmering to protect it. You want to eventually build your own world, a haven for your family and friends. Isn't it selfish to restrict heaven to those you know? I'm trying to make heaven on earth for everyone. It's not my fault that humans have to change to make that happen. And if you succeed, what then? Ichigo snarled. What then could humanity possibly aspire to? If everything is perfect, then why bother thinking at all? How could we possibly improve upon ourselves if we believe the world is perfect as it is? And what of your world? Aayumu pointed out with narrowed eyes. For all your criticism of my plan, yours is hardly any better. An illusion of Ichigo himself stepped beside the King of Hell, who nodded at him. Our name is Ichigo. Dad said it meant he who protects. We often said it came from Ichi for first prize and Go for guardian angel. Ichigo, number one guardian. But we can't be everywhere, can we? We can't protect everyone if they're in different places. We learned that when trying to save Mom, Karen and Yuzu sent them to hell. Obviously the answer is to keep them in a safe place, Zeni mused aloud. Which is why you thought of making a world to begin with. What are you going to do, Ichigo? Masaki asked softly. You know that I can't just let people suffer if it's in my power to help them. Even if you make your world, you know I won't stay there. Will you force us? Ishin questioned soberly. You know that we don't have the power to stop you. If you put your foot down, we would have no choice. What about our lives? Our friends, all the ties we have to the living world, Yuzu asked with a slightly choked sound in her voice. I don't want to leave it all behind. But then, how can you keep us safe? Karen voiced Ichigo's own feelings. The only other way you can think of is Aayumu's way, by changing all of humanity. Are you really so different? All Aayumu wants to do is protect humanity, just like you want to protect us. Enough, Ichigo whispered, his voice pained. That is what I wanted as well, a vision of Aizen spoke up, standing next to Aayumu. Sacrifices must be made for peace. Anything worth having has a price. Was it so wrong that I wanted to turn Soul Society into a real heaven, one where souls who died painfully may find hope and peace instead of being forced to live in the more lawless places in the Rukongai? 100,000 souls for the Oken, in exchange for heaven for all. Doesn't that seem like a reasonable trade? You traded the people of the Rukongai in exchange for Karakura town's safety, Yukitake reminded him. And when you made that deal with Aizen, you intended to keep it. Nameless strangers would die, but you would be able to keep the bonds you had held precious. So what makes you different from them? Soifun demanded sharply. From Aizen and Aayumu. Aizen wanted to create a utopia for Soul Society. Aayumu wants to create a utopia for all the worlds. You want to create a utopia for your family and friends. The only difference between you all is the matter of scale. Why are you right, and they wrong? Please. Ichigo breathed. Enough. I get it. I know that eventually, Karen and Yuzu won't need or want me to protect them. I wouldn't dream of forcing mom or dad into anything. I know that Aayumu is doing what he thinks is right, that he's pursuing the only option that he can see. I know that Aizen did the same. I know I am doing the same. I know we're so alike in some ways. But even so, even though I understood Aizen, I couldn't let him kill innocent people. The same thing applies to Aayumu. And if I ever end up like that, then I pray someone does for me what I do for them. The concept you're using is empathy. And just like that, the illusions vanished, leaving Ichigo standing alone. Concept you're using is empathy. Everything was silent for a moment. Then, finally, Shinji spoke up. Well, DMN. Ayumu's forced Ichigo to empathize with him. He knows what he's doing. Urahara nodded. Emotional manipulation. Even though Ichigo knows that's what Ayumu's doing, that doesn't mean it's not working. Ichigo can't afford to hesitate when he fights Aayumu again. Dad? Why wouldn't we want Ichi and Ai to protect us? Yuzu asked her father, biting her lip. Ishin knelt and ruffled her hair gently. It's part of growing up. Someday soon you'll want to do things on your own, to live your own life and take care of your own problems. He threw a meaningful glance over at Karen before returning his gaze to his other daughter. Life for most people never really gets any easier, Yuzu. You won't be 11 forever. As you get older, more and more responsibility will be put on you. You might resent it, you might appreciate it, but your priorities will change as you mature into a beautiful young woman. In time, you might find his, and my, presence stifling, or maybe you'll feel like we don't trust you to come to us if you do need help. That's natural. Ichigo knows that that day will come, and knows that when it does he'll have to step back for your own happiness. Seeing Yuzu's uncomprehending face, he smiled and shook his head. I don't expect you to get it just yet, but remember that we're here for you, alright? Yuzu nodded silently, returning her attention back to her brother, who was reaching up to tap the communication device he wore in his ear. Yamamoto. Where are you? We followed Aayumu into the desert level. I have used Bakudo 26, Kyako to render your mother invisible, and she is preparing an attack. Have you escaped the illusion? Yeah. Sorry about that. It was unavoidable. I do not expect one as young as yourself to be completely at peace with yourself. Urahara watched the feed as Ichigo began Shunpai and G down to rejoin the fight. Ichigo, with any luck Aayumu isn't aware of how quickly you threw off the illusion. Try to remain hidden. Yamamoto Sotecho, are you able to break the barrier without killing him? Yes. When I give the signal, do so. Ichigo, at that moment you need to use your strongest Bakudo. Got it, Ichigo acknowledged. Yamamoto was playing it cool, Aayumu noted. The Sotecho had reverted to Shirkai and was constantly probing Ayumu's defenses with fire. Every other second or so, Yamamoto was casting purple concentrated flame spells at the most evident weak point, severely cracking the barrier but not breaking it. What was he up to? So, you sealed my other self on this level, Aayumu observed, breaking the silence. I can sense his seal. Quite impressive, really. When I finish killing you, I'll have to have you be the one to seal the rayo. It'd be inconvenient for him to die, but he's in the way. Sealing him is an elegant solution. Yamamoto remained silent, continuing his repetitive yet ultimately useless work. You do realize that one definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. Aayumu pointed out. Unless you do something different, you're not going to get through my barrier. All you're doing is wearing yourself out. Why do you not use your Bankai? Still Yamamoto said nothing. Aayumu's lips twitched downwards. Are you really so determined not to speak with me? Finally, Yamamoto opened his mouth. It's pointless to say something if you already know it. It's counterproductive to explain the purpose of my actions to you. You already know why I do not use my Bankai. And if you do not know the reasons behind my actions, then I shall not tell you. It is true that I know why you are not using your Bankai, Aayumu mused aloud. The intense heat it creates, your Bankai is designed to utterly destroy your enemies. That makes it worthless against me, as you do not want to kill me on accident. But what could be your purpose, attacking my barrier but not breaking through? Without warning, Yamamoto flashed into Shunpa and reappeared behind Aayumu, his spare hand crackling with electricity. Byakurai. Aayumu was taken by surprise, but still managed to evade the bolt of lightning easily enough. But he was completely unprepared for the powerful arrow that shot through his barrier on his other side a split second later. For chains lashed out from behind and wrapped up Aayumu from his thighs to his shoulders. Aayumu twisted his head to see Ichigo in resurrection form, the chains held in his left hand. Ichigo channeled more and more Ryoryoku to his chains, struggling to keep them whole as Aayumu tried to break through with sheer brute strength. Yamamoto. Hurry. Rikujikoro. Even as the 6 bars of light impacted Aayumu's midsection, Yamamoto was already in action. The Sotecho stabbed Ryujin Jaka into the ground and formed a hand seal. Bakudo 99, Bankin. First song, Shiryu. Second song, Hyakurensen. The white fabric conjured by Yamamoto's Bakudo wrapped around Aayumu, covering him from head to toe just in time for the cloud of metal bolts created by Hyakurensen to impale Aayumu. Final song, Bankin Taiho. A giant metal cube materialized above Aayumu and began to fall, only to suddenly explode, sending metal shrapnel flying in many directions. Oh, for FS sake, what now? Ichigo groaned. You must be Kurosaki Ichigo and Yamamoto Genryusai Shigekuni, Aayumu's voice came from above. Yamamoto grit his teeth, spotting the origin of the voice. Another avatar, he snarled. Kurosaki, seal the one we have as well as you can. I'll keep this one busy. Ah, I think not. Yet another Aayumu appeared out of nowhere and with a slash of Asahi no Kagami, the avatar that they had captured was freed from the fabric and chains that had ensnared him. You have got to be kidding me, Ichigo commented, completely exasperated as he leapt back and tried to figure out what to do next. 3 Aayumus. Did you really think I would stop at one? Spare me, the almost captured Aayumu asked mockingly. One of us for each of you, and a spare to unseal us if we were beaten, another explained as the third one landed next to them. By the way, Yamamoto, that seal you used on me was truly something special. I'll see if I can give you an experience equally pleasant. Yamamoto, Ichigo. Urahara's voice said urgently. The 3 here comprise the entirety of Aayumu's soul. Yamamoto and Ichigo shared a glance. With all the trouble they had with one Aayumu, each of them knew that if there were 3 working together it would be nigh impossible to succeed. But if there were just one, even if that one were 3 times as strong, then there was a chance. They had to kill all 3 Aayumus at once. Ichigo wasn't sure he was capable of it. But he could see in Yamamoto's eyes that the old man had an idea. Ichigo nodded, ready to support Yamamoto as best he could. Yamamoto's lips twisted into a grim smile. Bankai. Zenka no Tachi. Ichigo was forced to take a step back from the sudden rush of superheated air, but cut his hand lightly as a Siro spiraled into existence between his horns. A few drops of blood floated swiftly up to the Siro, and Ichigo prepared himself to fire a Gran Ray Siro even as he began spinning Tensa Zangetsu by the chain, charging up a Getsuga. Yamamoto lightly stuck Zenka no Tachi into the ground, and the Aayumu who had been sealed by him paled slightly. But it was too late. Zenka no Tachi, south, Kaka Jumanokushi Dezojin. The ground opened, and once again thousands and thousands of ash skeletons stood upon the desert of the Dmed. Yamamoto pointed Zenka no Tachi at the three Aayumus. Hold them down, he commanded, and the undead surged in like the tide, bony hands made of ash gripping ankles, arms. The various avatars were very quick about dispatching them, but sheer numbers ensured that they were unable to escape. Now, Kurosaki. Ichigo's eyes had gone very wide, but he was ready when Yamamoto called his name. Hollow and Shinigami lunged at the avatars of hell, techniques at the ready. Zenka no Tachi, north, Tenchi Kaijin. Gran Rei Siro. Getsuga Tensho. The barriers that all three Aayumus conjured were wiped away as if they were nothing behind the sheer destructive force of the most powerful Shinigami and Visor team. When the sand settled, Ichigo breathed a sigh of relief. All three had been killed in one shot. What is that? Yamamoto demanded, pointing at a rather large hole in space. It was closing slowly, but Ichigo immediately knew what it was. That's a tear in the fabric of the space-time, he said slowly. It happens sometimes when I use Gran Rei Siro. Yamamoto nodded, but there was a calculating look in his eyes that had Ichigo a little worried. How many more times can you use it? Ichigo checked his reserves. I could use it another 2 or 3 times in short succession and still be able to fight. But if I'm given a few minutes to recover some Ryoryoku between shots, I could fire as many as you want. I'm able to recover my Ryoryoku by absorbing some of the erasure in the environment. Pretty sure it's a combination of my Quincy heritage and hollow powers. Yamamoto nodded again. Kurosaki, I want you to use your Gran Rei Siro as frequently as you can. The Hell Dimension is Aayumu's world. He is linked to it intrinsically. Put simply, damaging the fabric of his world means damaging his soul. At worst it will be an unwelcome distraction. At best, it could give him crippling pain, enough so that we could seal him. Ichigo nodded with a fierce grin behind his mask. Got it. I can do that. Well done, Aayumu greeted lightly, stepping forward with Asahi no Kagami at the ready and a barrier already conjured. You managed to kill all 3 of me at once. You do realize I was expecting you to finish unifying my soul? It was truly your only choice. Why do you think we purposely stood next to our other selves? Now I have a grasp of your most destructive techniques. So what? So it means that they will not harm me anymore, Aayumu replied. With a gesture towards his body, he materialized the same armor that Zeni had been wearing during his later fights with Ichigo. I created this armor eons ago. It negates spiritual attacks that the bearer understands. The more I understand them, the better the negation. For Zeni, who understood the Getsuga Tensho completely, your Getsuga was worthless, he continued, gesturing towards Ichigo offhandedly. For me, this armor is the ultimate expression of the power behind empathy. Now that I understand your techniques, they cannot harm me. Please, feel free to take a few minutes. I'm interested to see what plan you can come up with. Ichigo scowled behind the mask. This could be very, very bad. We've got to get that armor off of him, he muttered. I concur, Yamamoto murmured. Have you any ideas? A random, insane thought ran through Ichigo's head. He highly doubted the possibility, but there was always a chance that some idiot had created it. Oh, I know I'm gonna regret asking this. I don't suppose there's a Kido to remove clothing or armor. It was a mark of how serious the situation was that not one of the assembled people in the living world made a joke about other reasons Ichigo might want to know a clothes removal Kido. They watched tensely through Ichigo's feed, praying that the answer was yes. Yamamoto merely stared disbelievingly at Ichigo for a second, but sighed. With the number of eccentric Shinigami in the Godai and the Kido Corps, I do not doubt its existence. However, I have never had reason to learn such a thing. With an exasperated growl, Yoruchi flashed up to machine where Urahara was waiting, microphone in hand. The scientist gave it to her wordlessly. The Kido exists, Yoruchi reported. When I transform a cat, my clothes don't change with me. Kisuke helped me learn a clothes destruction Kido to handle it. Bad news is that it's not something I can teach you in the span of a few minutes. Keep him busy, boys. I'll be there shortly. Shoving the microphone back at Kisuke, Yoruchi vanished and reappeared right in front of the barrier being maintained by the two Kido masters. Tessai glanced back at Urahara, who nodded grimly. I'm going alone, Yoruchi said aloud, halting several of Ichigo's friends who were halfway to joining her. Unless one of you is a masterclass assassin and has somehow hidden it from me, you'll only slow me down. As it is, even I will only be useful to them for one thing. Can any of you claim to be able to fight on their level? The frustrated silence said it all. Take this, Urahara said, throwing an earpiece at her. Yoruchi caught it and in one smooth motion, put it in her ear. And this, he added, lobbing a slightly larger device in her direction. It's a mobile camera. Once you reach the desert level, push the button on the side and it'll activate. It's programmed to track the largest sources of Ryatsu at a distance, allowing us to see more of what's going on. Maybe it'll see something Yamamoto or Ichigo can't, something we can use. Nodding at the scientist, Yoruchi returned her attention to the barrier. Only open it for a second, she ordered. No. 1/4 of a second. On my 3 count. 1. 2. 3. The barrier dropped for a fraction of a second. And then the goddess of flash was gone, diving into hell. Leave hell with me for the moment, Yamamoto ordered Ichigo. I will keep him occupied. Go use your Gran Ray Zero. As we talked about. Right. You two sound like you have a plan, Aayumu commented. Well then, shall we begin? Ichigo flashed away just as Yamamoto moved his hand outward. Daichi Tenio. The desert sands lunged at Aayumu, appearing almost as a tidal wave of sand from all directions. Aayumu gave no reaction until the second he would have been crushed by the sand, at which point he carelessly swung Asahi no Kagami. The pressure behind the swing blasted away the sand easily, leaving him untouched. However, Yamamoto had been hidden in the sand, had used it to get close. Show. Ayumu's eyes went wide. The incredibly simple spell punched right through his barrier just in time for Yamamoto to grab him by his arm and fling him unceremoniously up into the air, whereupon Yamamoto promptly shunpaed directly above him. Sakatsu, he bellowed, using a two-fisted punch to send Aayumu careening down into the desert. Yet the old Sotecho was not done yet. Raikoho. Lightning crackled down his arm and then flashed down through the air, impacting Aayumu right in the chest before causing an enormous explosion. When the smoke cleared, Aayumu remained there on the desert sand, apparently unharmed, but his expression was quite clearly one of surprise. Yamamoto stood there in the air in all of his fiery glory, his Ryatsu billowing off of him. I am the Sotecho of the Godai 13. There is no stronger Shinigami than I. What does it matter if you understand one technique? I have dozens, hundreds of techniques that I have mastered in the millennia I have lived. Your armor may have saved you from my flame, but do not presume to think that you have defeated me. Just then, a Gran Ray Zero fired nearby. Aayumu winced and clutched his heart, and Yamamoto allowed himself a ferocious smile. I may not succeed in sealing you, but I will keep you from getting to Kurosaki Ichigo. I will buy him the time he needs to tear your soul apart. Chapter 78, Deicide. I will buy him the time he needs to tear your soul apart. Mashiro quickly wrote out something in a small notebook she pulled from a pocket in her bodysuit. Spotting this, Kensei furrowed his brows. What's that? Oh, this? Mashiro waved the notebook. It's where I take notes. Take notes. Kensei repeated slowly, disbelievingly. On what? Lots of things. Here, look. She shoved the notebook into Kensei's face. Kensei sputtered for a second, then took it and began reading from the page that she'd added to. Things to learn to be like Berry Tan, he read aloud quietly. Bankai. Scary serious faces. How to beat people up and then make them your friend. Ishida and Renji, who were standing close enough to overhear, twitched and gave each other commiserating looks. Ulquiorra, also nearby, began looking at Mashiro out of the corner of his eye but said nothing. Master Shuanpa Sonido. Heido. Resurrección. Sealing. How to tear souls apart. Eyes twitching at the last entry, Kensei handed the notebook back to a smiling Mashiro. You're trying to be like Kurosaki. Yep. Berry Tan is a real superhero, she chirped. He tries his hardest, and he learns everything he can, and he wears power limiters, and he does his best to help everyone, and he never loses when it's important. So I'm trying to be like him by learning how to do everything he does. Kensei opened his mouth to criticize her mild obsession with superheroes, and then thought better of it. Kurosaki seemed to have his head on straight, he knew when to be serious and seemed able to read situations well enough. If Mashiro thought that Kurosaki was a superhero and was trying to emulate him, then perhaps she'd stop being quite so immature all the time. Well, you could have worse role models, Kensei finally conceded, giving her back the notebook. Mashiro smiled brightly before tucking the notebook back into its pocket. Who's your role model, Kensei? The question caught him off guard, but Kensei answered honestly. I've never had one. I just want to be the best I can be. I suppose if I had to pick a Shinigami I wanted to be like, then it would have to be Shihoin Yoruchi. Fast, strong, efficient. Master of Hakuda and Brooks no nonsense when times are serious. Speaking of our favorite kitty cat, Urahara interrupted, typing quickly. It looks like she's reached the desert level. She's activated the mobile camera. Bringing the feed online, now. A third video appeared in between the other two, and everyone fell silent to watch as they were finally fully able to see the fight between Yamamoto and Aayumu. Blades danced as Yamamoto and Aayumu battled it out directly. Aayumu had foregone resummoning his barrier as it was clearly obvious that Yamamoto could break it on a whim. Asahi no Kagami clashed against Zenka no Tachi over and over again. But then Yamamoto broke the deadlock by lashing out with his other arm. Ikatsu. Aayumu took the blow directly to the chest and let out a loud grunt as he was pushed back roughly a dozen feet. Much to Yamamoto's annoyance, the empathy armor that Aayumu was wearing didn't even appear dented. It wouldn't burn, Raikoho hadn't pierced it, and it wasn't weak physically either. What was it going to take to destroy it? Yamamoto did not want to rely completely on Yoruchi's clothing destruction spell, but he was running out of ideas. I'll admit, I'm quite impressed, Aayumu admitted as he rolled his shoulder to stretch it out. Absolute mastery of fire, more variety of spells than most sorcerers, unbelievably strong hand-to-hand fighter and a master of the blade. Is there anything you have not gone out of your way to master? No. Yamamoto replied simply. Another Gran Rei Zero fired, and Aayumu winced again. Yamamoto, having been waiting for this, instantly began his assault once more. With a mere thought, he generated a blue-white glowing rod of energy in his hand and hurled it at Aayumu. Hyaparankan. Rikujikoro. But just as Yamamoto had expected, Aayumu was able to recover in time to lash out with Asahi no Kagami, shattering the rods and the bars of light. It's useless, he cried out. Heinoa. Yamamoto commanded in response, creating not one, not two, but three distinct glowing yellow energy ropes, controlling each one with a finger from his free hand. The middle one lunged straight for Aayumu, but the other two veered off to attack from the sides. Gritting his teeth, Aayumu vanished in a burst of high speed just before the ropes would have hit him. But apparently Yamamoto had known he was going to do just that and was already 3/4 of the way to meeting him, both hands firm on Zenka no Tachi. There was no time to block, but that was fine. Aayumu knew of Yamamoto's Bankai technique, its cutting power was derived from the impossible heat along its edge. Since he understood the technique, his armor would handle it without issue. But the Soteicho wasn't relying on Zanka no Tachi's ability. Hitetsum, Nadajiri. Yamamoto uttered darkly, his Zanpakuto flashing forward with extreme speed. Ayumu's eyes widened as his armor cracked severely down the middle. What? He gasped. Yamamoto's eyes glittered with satisfaction. Ah, finally. Your armor is not invincible after all. What did you just do? Aayumu demanded. Do you think me such a fool to explain my technique to you now, after you have gloated so about how understanding it is enough for your armor to negate it? Yamamoto spat back. Hitetsum, Nadajiri. Not daring to taste that technique again and risk his armor until he understood it properly, Aayumu dodged and flashed away, trying to buy time to think. He quickly conjured his barrier, too. If nothing else, it would force Yamamoto to expend a little extra energy to pierce it before he could attempt to bind Aayumu again. That technique had nothing to do with the heat of his Bankai, he muttered furiously. Was it some kind of Zanpakuto-Kido fusion? Perhaps that show technique he used earlier? Do not think you can escape me. Yamamoto roared from a distance away. Byakurai. Yet another Grand Ray Zero erupted somewhere else in the desert, and Aayumu clutched at his heart even as he used Asahi no Kagami to block the Byakurai that had pierced his barrier as if it had hardly existed. Kurosaki Ichigo's attacks were hurting him more and more. The question was, should he continue playing with Yamamoto to see what he could do, or kill him to focus on Kurosaki? And then, without warning, he felt a presence right behind him. Aayumu began to twist around, but it was too late. Yoruchi had placed both hands on the armor. Fuku Hakai, the assassin cried out. To Ayumu's utter astonishment, he was suddenly utterly naked. His armor was gone, his clothes were gone, even his sandals were gone. Unable to quite believe what had just happened, Aayumu just stared for a moment at Yoruchi, who smirked, gave a cheeky wave and flickered into Shunpa, vanishing from Ayumu's senses less than a second later. Rikujikoro. The incoming threat to his person was enough to get his mind back on the fight. Aayumu cut the bars of light heading for him and brought his attention back to Yamamoto, absently conjuring a replacement outfit onto himself. Did that woman seriously just destroy my clothes and armor? He asked disbelievingly. Yes. Do you have any idea how long it took to make that armor? Aayumu demanded. Hundreds of years of work. Gone in an instant. To something as trivial as a clothes destruction spell. So you can't just recreate it in an instant. That's good. I had been worried that might not be the case, Yamamoto said quietly. Now then, shall we continue? No. Enough of this. Aayumu reached out with his free hand, and suddenly dozens of chains became visible, clinking and waving under the power of Ayumu's Ryatsu. There were chains everywhere, completely surrounding the two of them. Congratulations, Yamamoto Genryusai Shigekuni, Soteicho of the Godiai, you have convinced me that you are in fact a threat to me. Yamamoto's eyes opened wide as first the chains, then Aayumu himself glowed brightly. Another sword materialized in his hand, one that was clearly not Asahi no Kagami. Then Aayumu attacked. The King of Hell was faster, stronger than he had been before. And what was worse, was that Yamamoto's heat aura was somehow not eradicating this new weapon. Yamamoto grunted as Zanka no Tachi flew into a flurry of blocks and counterattacks. What did you just do? He growled. All souls in this realm belong to me, Aayumu explained. Their powers are mine to command when I call for them. You are not the first to wield fire. With their abilities, combined with the strength of my Ryoryoku, it's almost trivial to become virtually immune to heat. Another Grand Ray Zero fired, and Aayumu winced in pain. Fortunately, it was enough of a distraction for a massive fist to slam into Aayumu from his left side, sending him flying. Yamamoto blinked, then looked at the figures that had just come to his aid. Nice going, Alon. Apache congratulated, approaching before wincing. Wow, it's hot. Is that you, old man? Don't get carried away, Apache. Much as I hate to admit it, we have no place being here, Mila Rose told her. We would die very quickly. We should retreat and let Harabel-sama and Alon do the fighting. I agree. Sunday through Sunday shook her head. Who would have thought we would be coming to a Shinigami's aid? None of that, Harabel rebuked. We don't have time for those petty conflicts. Yamamoto, are you still combat capable? Yes. Yamamoto took a breath, steadying himself. I assume Kurosaki sent you to my aid. Not explicitly, Harabel admitted. He allowed me to enter hell to save my fraction, but my orders after that were to guard his mother with my life. As I was unable to locate her where Kurosaki-sama said she would be, I felt the best way to fulfill my duty would be to help hold off hell. Alon roared a warning and let fly another punch at the swiftly returning Aayumu, only to be sliced in half from head to navel in a single slice. As the two halves fell to either side, Aayumu carelessly walked between them towards the others. Yet more Tagabito siding against me? You must be punished. Run. Harabel urged, placing herself between Aayumu and her beloved fraction. Run, get to the gates and find Ulquiorra. He can cut the chains. There was silence for a moment, and then Apache's voice, quiet and scared, whispered out loud. Harabel-sama. I can't control my body. Yamamoto blurred in place for a split second. An instant later, 3 sets of chains fell to the sand. Go, the Sotecho commanded. They did not need to be told a third time, all 3 of them promptly vanished in a burst of sonido. Harabel said nothing, but the glance she gave him clearly expressed appreciation. Then she turned her attention back to Aayumu. Destroy, Tiburon. With a flash of Ryatsu, Harabel transformed into her Resurrection. La Gata. Water blasts shaped like shark teeth began firing rapidly from Tiburon, though Aayumu flashed about at high speed, dodging every one of them. Is that the best you have? Aayumu mocked mercilessly. Your attacks aren't even coming close. I don't expect to hit you, Harabel stated coldly. Cascada. An enormous surge of water materialized and rushed at Aayumu, who stood his ground. But then Yamamoto unleashed a terrific blast of fire, instantly evaporating the water and turning it to steam, obscuring their views. Do not think I will let you hide. Aayumu declared, flaring his power and dispelling the steam. Knowing the Sotecho's likely strategy, Aayumu then turned on his heel and stabbed Yamamoto in the chest from where the Sotecho had been lunging at him. Aayumu was completely surprised, therefore, when the Yamamoto he had stabbed vanished into nothing. An afterimage. A Gran Ray Zero fired in the distance, and Aayumu winced, his movement slowing for a moment. But even that moment was enough. Behind him, Yamamoto crouched low and executed a perfect low spinning sweep kick, knocking Aayumu onto his butt. Sai. Geki. Yamamoto cast quickly, forcing Ayumu's arms to lock behind his back and then paralyzing him with a red glow. Rikujikoro. Gochuteken. Kyushibari. Aayumu easily broke free of the 2 low-level Bakudo, but they served their purpose in holding him for the time it took for the 6 bars of light to hit him. He was able to break through that as well after another second, but then 5 ridiculously tall metal pillars landed on him, pinning his limbs and back. Then the black holes of Kyushibari appeared, and Aayumu was evidently trapped. Not wanting to waste any time, Yamamoto immediately began chanting. Limit of the 1,000 blades, dutiful blades. A mere second later, 5 Quincy arrows shot out and impacted the metal pillars of Gochuteken, destroying them. Then 3 of the black holes were destroyed by bolts of lightning. Aayumu chuckled as he flared his power yet again, destroying the remaining black holes as he got up. Ah, my lieutenants, well done. Handle the lieutenants, Yamamoto ordered the former Espada without wasting a moment, restraining himself from groaning in frustration. I will keep him occupied until you return. Understood. With that, Harabel vanished a burst of sonido. You'll keep me occupied? Aayumu repeated softly. No, Yamamoto Genryusai Shigekuni. Your time is just about done. Yamamoto scowled, considering his options. The ultimate defense of his Bankai had been bypassed. His fire was essentially useless directly. But Aayumu had proven susceptible to misdirection and indirect attacks. That gave Yamamoto a few ideas. Hyoga Siren. A massive wave of ice rushed at Aayumu, who carelessly swung his yet unnamed blade. The ice shattered and melted almost instantly, the water being absorbed into the sands. Making note of it, Yamamoto was already casting his next spell. Daichi Tenyo. For the second time, the desert sands lunged at Aayumu. Is that all? He drawled, easily blasting it away again with the pressure of his sword swing. He immediately fell into a guard position. Last time, Yamamoto had used the cover of this attack to get close and connect a series of attacks. Aayumu would not let that happen again. But that was not Yamamoto's intent. His hands lashed out from under the sands that Aayumu stood upon, gripping him by his ankles and pulling him down into the water-soaked sand that Yamamoto had filled with his Ryuryoku. A few moments later, Yamamoto stood once again atop the desert, concentrating on the makeshift water seal that he'd made up on the spot, shoring up any weak spots. It wouldn't last long, especially since water was not his specialty, but it should be sufficient to retrieve Kurosaki. Once Kurosaki had applied his own seals, then Yamamoto could use the Boidoburedo Kugyo. He had been lucky, Yamamoto reflected. Aayumu had not anticipated the water from his first attack remaining a threat. Behind you. Urahara's voice yelled in the Sotecho's ear. But it was too late. Even as Yamamoto began to move, he felt hot steel pierce his back and burst through his chest, felt his body go numb as his spine was severed. His eyes widened in surprise for a brief moment, before they closed, apparently in resignation. How? Yamamoto asked simply. Did you forget I can resurrect the people whose bones make up this desert? It was easy to bring just one to life while you were underground. I replaced myself with him just in time for you to pull him under. Aayumu smiled. You fought well. Do not worry, you will have that opportunity again. And then Aayumu sliced with Asahi no Kagami, and Yamamoto's head left his shoulders. F-. Renji swore loudly. This is bad. This is very bad, Hitsugaya agreed. Ichigo. Urahara spoke quickly into the microphone. Yamamoto's dead, prepare for direct confrontation. No more Gran Rey Zeros, they'll only give away your location. Be aware that Aayumu has the ability to tap into the abilities of Togabito when he materializes chains. Ichigo said nothing for a moment. Theirs isn't a curse strong enough to express how shitty that news is. At least tell me that the armor is gone. The armor is gone, Yoruchi confirmed. That's something, at least. Yoruchi, you've got to get my mother out of here. If Yamamoto's dead, the invisibility spell he put on her will have worn off. On it. Urahara. Ichigo's voice was quieter now. I can keep Aayumu occupied, but I'm under no illusions that I can seal him on my own. I need help, powerful help. I don't want to risk sending any visit here, not after what happened last time. Harabel seemed fine, though. So if any Arrancar listening have capture techniques, now's the time to tell me. All eyes turned to Ulquiorra, Stark and Neliel. Each of them shook their heads negatively. Urahara cleared his throat. They do not. Didn't think so. Moving down the list, then. Inoue's barriers would be useful, but she's recovering, and even when she's back on her feet she'll be needed in the living world. Unless Ishida's hiding some super Quincy sealing power, he's not going to be much help here, and Chad doesn't have the right skill set for capturing people, especially someone as fast as Aayumu. That rules out the Vizard, Arrancar and humans. That means I need a Shinigami. A Taicho-class master of every form of Shinigami skill, Hoho, Zanjutsu, Hakuda, Kido. Someone with experience with sealing. There's only one man besides Yamamoto I know that has that combo. You've seen Aayumu fight, how do you feel about a tag team? Chad and Ishida nodded in agreement as they were mentioned. But they were stunned when Ichigo asked Urahara to fight. It was hard to see him as anything other than an eccentric scientist. A former Shinigami whose strength came from his genius, rather than spiritual ability. Out of all their interactions with Urahara, the man had enabled them, had given them information, had demonstrated an intelligence and ability to use it that could strike them dumb in awe. But Urahara had only once displayed any sort of combat prowess, and that was against Aizen. Urahara blinked for a moment, then took off his bucket hat and set it down on the computer. When he looked up again, his face could have been carved from stone. My blade is yours, Ichigo. Ishida shivered. Urahara's Ryatsu, like his voice, had become suddenly sharp, deadly, focused. It gave the Quincy an impression of an inevitable, silent death, one that could be anticipated but would be helpless to avoid. Ishida no longer had any trouble imagining Urahara being an instrument of death. Thank you. Don't thank me yet, Ichigo. Silently, the founder of the Shinigami Research and Development Institute drew Beneheim from her cane sheath, the light reflecting off her blade gleaming. Thank me when the mission is complete. Karen was pale, shaking as she stared with wide eyes at Urahara. Gone was the shopkeeper who liked to play jokes and give out candy. In his place was an assassin who wore geta to avoid letting his feet rest in the blood of the innocents and guilty alike whom he'd slain in the name of duty. And in his hand was a princess in crimson who danced with a cruel smile on her face, who saw beauty in the way blood was spilled, who lovingly guided her master's hand to give her more and more of the precious ruby life for her to dance in. Monster. Ishin put a hand on her shoulder. Turn off your power, Karen. That is a man you really don't want to look too deeply at. Karen agreed 100%. She did as she was told, shivering strongly as she turned towards her father and buried her face into his robes, desperately in need of comfort. How? How can a man hide something like that inside him? Ishin finished quietly. Karen, everyone has a side like that. It's just a matter of what brings it to the surface. Urahara Kisuke is a man who has learned how to summon it himself. Karen stilled, and looked at her father with horror-filled eyes. Everyone has a side like that, she whispered. Even you. Even Ichigo. Even me. Even Ichigo. I pray to Kami-sama that you never need see them. Urahara ignored them, walking purposefully to the gates of hell. Open the barrier, he ordered quietly. Tensai and Hatchi did as they were told, and Urahara was gone in a flicker of Shuunpa. You're here. Ichigo's voice was calm, measured. Oh. I thought you couldn't sense my Ryatsu. Aayumu questioned, appearing a few meters away. I still can't. But I can smell Yamamoto's blood on you. Aayumu's smile had no joy to it. Your Arrancar friends are dead now. I know. Harabel was cornered by your lieutenants. Her fraction were annihilated by the Tagabito who are trying to reclaim the portal to the living world. You knew. Then why didn't you save them? Aayumu asked curiously. For the same reason Yamamoto didn't. It's callous to say, but their lives weren't as important as sealing you away. I was busy using Gran Ray Zero, trying to help Yamamoto from afar. You got close, Aayumu admitted. Another one or two of those and he would definitely have caught me if I hadn't taken him out right then. Ichigo nodded, acknowledging the information and storing it for future use. Harabel knew the risks. Her fraction were already Tagabito. He narrowed his eyes behind the mask of his resurrection. When you are defeated, when they resurrect, I will cut their chains. I see. Does the same apply to them? Aayumu gestured, and two large pillars rose from the desert. Tied to them with chains were the forms of Yoruchi and Masaki. I caught them trying to escape. Do not worry, they live. For the moment. Ichigo reached out with his spiritual sense and confirmed that they were in fact who they appeared to be. You have no idea the mistake you've just made, he said, his eyes burning with hate in stark contrast to the icy tone of his voice. Oh. It seems to me that I've captured your mother and someone else dear to you. A Getsuga flared into existence around Tensa Zangetsu. Not just dear to me, Aayumu. On cue, Urahara appeared in a flicker of Shunpa right behind Aayumu, his face impassive, but Beneheim mid-swing in glowing bloody red. Kamisori, Beneheim. Ayumu's eyes went wide as his right hand, the one holding Asahi no Kagami, was cleanly cut off. He leapt away, trying to get away, only for Ichigo to grab him by his left wrist and lash out with Tensa Zangetsu, obviously trying to cut off Ayumu's other hand. Aayumu barely managed to wrench his wrist out and take the hit with the nameless sword he had in his hand. The Getsuga fired, flinging him dozens of feet away. Shibari, Beneheim. Aayumu managed to shunt the Getsuga away just in time to cut the net that Urahara had conjured with the sword in his left hand. Then he flashed away, moving far away from the net and setting himself up so he could see both Ichigo and Urahara at once. His stump glowed for a moment, and a second later his hand was completely regenerated. Asahi no Kagami materialized in his hand just in time to block a powerful strike from Ichigo. But Ichigo instantly leapt away to the side, much to Ayumu's confusion until he saw Urahara in motion a dozen meters away, a sinister blackness outlined in purple flickering around the assassin's fingers. Unite. Repulse. Know your own powerlessness. Hado 90, Kurohitsuji. Watching the black coffin irked itself around Aayumu, Ichigo gathered his power, preparing to use his chains to help Urahara seal hell away. But then the Hado shattered, with an annoyed-looking Aayumu stepping out, right into a Rikujikoro that Urahara had silently cast. Ichigo promptly flung his chains at Aayumu, looking to seal him away, but Aayumu flared his Ryatsu and shattered the Bakudo in time to dodge out of the way of the chains. Yet Urahara still had not stopped moving, having apparently completely anticipated Aayumu's actions. He had moved quickly enough that he had managed to tap both of Aayumu's wrists, his fingers flowing with power, and moved away. And what was that supposed to? Aayumu began, before cutting himself off as glowing yellow rings had appeared around his wrists. Urahara's expression remained just as impassive as it had upon arriving. Fusatsu Keikiai. Sheet. But it was too late. Ayumu's arms were forced outwards by the power of his own Ryatsu just before he was encapsulated into a white oval of fiery Ryatsu. Ichigo kept his sword at the ready. Had Aayumu died from that seal, or would he emerge weakened? He hoped it was the latter, but he was feeling a lot more confident about their chances. Urahara was scary in battle. The white fire died suddenly, revealing what appeared to be a sunburnt Aayumu. Well, that hurt, the leader of hell admitted. You forced my own Ryatsu to try to burn out my Hikusui, to render me powerless and at your mercy. It's lucky that I killed Yamamoto then, his mastery of the fire element was truly unparalleled. With his knowledge and my power, I was able to stave off most of the damage. I see. In that case, given the situation, I can't think of a better setting for this. Urahara finally smiled, but it was not a smile Ichigo had ever wanted to see on his face. It wasn't Urahara's having fun at your expense smile, nor was it his I'm being secretive and mysterious because it's fun smile. It communicated neither satisfaction nor grimness. No, with his normally gray eyes glowing a bright red, with his lips parted just enough to begin to see his teeth, with the wisps of crimson Ryatsu emanating from his body, Urahara's smile made him look like the devil incarnate. Urahara placed Beneheim horizontally across his body, placing his other palm on the blade itself as if to brace himself. But Beneheim was backwards, and the blade lightly bit into his skin. As blood began to trace its way down Beneheim's blade, Urahara uttered a single word. Bankai. Crimson Ryatsu swirled around Urahara for a moment before settling. Beneheim had transformed, she had become double-edged, and along the flat of the blade there was a long, thin rectangular hole reaching from about 4 inches from the tip of the blade to the guard. The U-shaped guard now sported a ruby on either side. But Beneheim was not the only thing changed. Urahara's clothes had changed. Now he wore matching jacket and pants, both the exact shade of freshly spilt blood, with a white diamond pattern running down his arms and sides. Urahara aimed his bankai right at Aayumu and whispered its name. Shinko Mauhi. Chapter 79, Blood Demon. After naming his bankai, Urahara didn't waste any time. Reversing his grip on Shinko Mauhi and lightly stabbing the sands below, he began to chant. I summon it. Ayumu's eyes narrowed, and he dashed at Urahara with the intent of disrupting the spell, whatever it was. But Ichigo was suddenly there, meeting Asahi no Kagami with Tensa Zangetsu. You're not getting near him, the wizard promised. Just try and stop me. Aayumu vanished in a burst of speed and sliced, attempting to behead the latest combatant. Once again, Ichigo materialized and blocked. They began a deadly dance, disappearing and reappearing for briefest instants all around Urahara, the sound of steel on steel ringing through the air. And all the while, Urahara continued his spell. As the giver of death, I summon it. As the taker of life, I summon it. With hands stained crimson, I summon it. He threw his head back and screamed at the sky. And I call it down. Come and shower us in the waters of life. Chi no aim, Shinko Mauhi. Thunder crashed, and it began to rain heavily. Several drops immediately hit Ichigo and Aayumu, and the King of Hell blinked, retreating several meters as he tried to work out what was going on. Raining, blood, he murmured aloud, observing the red rain fall on his hand, smelling the unique odor. Urahara smiled demonically again. This world may be yours, but you're in my domain now. Chihari, Shinko Mauhi. At once, the rain turned deadly, thousands of drops of blood reshaped themselves into tiny needles and hurled themselves at Aayumu. But even as the man wrapped himself up in his barrier, he grunted in pain. The blood that had already landed on him had reshaped itself as well, and Aayumu was now bleeding from several tiny holes in his body. Aayumu very quickly materialized and grabbed two of his Tagabito's chains. His wounds healed immediately, and with an all-too-familiar burst of heat, the blood that he'd already bled evaporated into nothing. The secondary sword he'd been wielding was replaced by Zanka no Tachi. Urahara's expression didn't change even as blood dripped down his face. So, you're using Yamamoto's power, now. Of course I am. Why wouldn't I? His defense was truly impressive, and well suited to your blood-based attacks. Even if you get past my barrier, I won't let you take my blood, Aayumu promised calmly. Urahara shook his head. I hope you don't mind if I put it to the test. Chihari, Shinko Mauhi. Aayumu didn't move at all as the air around him seemed to shiver, as the blood rain transformed into hundreds of tiny painful spears, before they all launched at him. His vision was obscured for a few seconds as his barrier was encased in bloody needles, but when it faded, Urahara was standing where he had been. You see? It's hopeless. You think so? Urahara's smile grew even more predatory, his cheeks stained red with blood. Did you really think that after 100 years of exile, I would not have a plan for how to counter Yamamoto? That I would not account for every possibility? I know his Shirkai. I know his Bankai. I know every single one of his capabilities, and I have a plan to counter them all. This is why Aizen feared me so, why he never came after me directly until after he had the Hogyoku in his grasp. He knew that if he did, I would kill him, because I always work out a counter to every power I am ever exposed to. Why don't you look at your feet? The King of Hell did so, and saw a small container, open. At that moment, Aayumu's breath caught, and his hand involuntarily went to his throat. What? You are able to breathe in your barrier, even when you encase yourself in it fully for minutes at a time. More than that, you can hear us, and we you. If sound can travel through the barrier, then air must be capable of passing through without issue, Urahara lectured. Zanka no Tachi's heat defense is automatic, instinctual. It does not rely on the concentration on its wielder to maintain. It incinerates everything that approaches you using an absurdly high heat. The assassin's smile grew wider, more satisfied as Aayumu fell to his knees, choking. Do you know the various states of matter? Solid, liquid, gas and plasma. Gases are converted to plasma through exposure to extremely high temperatures. Temperatures reachable, for instance, using Zenka no Tachi. It must have taken Yamamoto weeks, if not months, of work to keep Zenka no Tachi from converting the air around him into plasma, simply so he could breathe. That means that neither your barrier nor Zenka no Tachi are stopping gas-based attacks. What you are feeling right now are the effects of a gas that I have developed. It's a very strong paralytic. It attacks the lungs first, drastically reducing the air you can inhale. At the same time, it enters your bloodstream and attacks your heart, slowing your heartbeat so that you don't in your panic asphyxiate yourself. Of course, in high enough doses this gas would be fatal. But, of course, we don't want that. I've made sure you'll live long enough for us to seal you. DMN, you. Aayumu wheezed. And of course, I've already taken out your lieutenants, Urahara mentioned offhandedly, his smirk turning absolutely predatory. No one to kill you and free you from this trap. Except, me. Aayumu breathed out harshly. And then, without warning, his body lit up in flames. A second later, he crumbled into ashes. Urahara finally frowned. I was hoping he wouldn't realize he could do that. Wait, what just happened? Ichigo asked, approaching. He'd hightailed it out of the rain of blood the moment he'd realized that Urahara was going to do something scary with it, that is, less than a second before Urahara had first used Chihari. Thankfully, the rain was lessening quickly, though the blood remained. Yamamoto's Bankai is powerful. Too powerful, Urahara explained. No soul is meant to be able to withstand that kind of heat for any length of time. That means that a defensive use of Ryuryoku is needed just to keep from disintegrating. Aayumu stopped powering his defense, and Zenka no Tachi torched him. Well, when he comes back, you can gas him again, right? Certainly, Urahara agreed. But he'll be prepared for it this time. Ichigo nodded in understanding. So, any other methods of getting past Zenka no Tachi? There are 3 main methods. Urahara held up 3 fingers, then lowered the first one. First, bypass Zenka no Tachi and attack the wielder through the lungs. You just did that, the wizard pointed out. Yes. Another finger went down. Second, turn the battle into a siege, and force the wielder to use up his Ryuryoku until he doesn't have enough to keep Zenka no Tachi from burning him alive. That's not a good option here, since Aayumu has a lot of Ryuryoku, and he can resurrect pretty quickly. Agreed. The last finger fell. Third, disable the wielder's ability to use it. That sounds like a winner to me. How do we do that? That's the tricky part. The answer to most questions of disabling is Bakudo, or sealing. Of course, that brings us to a catch-22, we can't seal him until we can get past Zenka no Tachi, and we can't get past Zenka no Tachi until we seal him. The next reasonable answer would be to cut off his hands, but Aayumu's already displayed the ability to regenerate them, Urahara admitted. Ideally we would resurrect Yamamoto and free him from the chains, thereby removing Zenka no Tachi from Aayumu's reach, but neither of us know how to do that. Ichigo gave Urahara a mild glare. Running low on time here. Aayumu will be back any second. Get to the point. Right then. Short answer, leave it to me. Stay back and attack when you see the signal. You'll know it when you see it. Shinji shook his head in wonder. Hot DMN. Kisuke had a way to take down the old man when he goes all out. Is anyone else a bit disturbed that Urahara's Bankai lets him make it rain blood? Ishida asked mildly. This coming from the guy whose arrows send souls straight to hell, Shinji commented deadpan. Ishida opened his mouth to retort, but then shrugged, conceding the point. Even so. Hitsugaya shrugged. It doesn't bother me. After all, I can make it snow, and make every snowflake lethal. Not so different from what he's doing, really. Chad met Ishida's gaze readily and subtly gestured towards his left arm. The message was clear. Chad found it a little unsettling, but considering that his left arm had the power to create gigantic skull-shaped crushing attacks, he didn't think he had room to comment. But Karen was shivering again. That technique, all that blood. Yuzu looked at her in concern. What is it, Karen? That technique. Karen repeated. I tried not to look, I really tried. I wanted to help Ichigo, so I tried to keep my focus just on Aayumu. I didn't mean to see it. Oh Kami-sama, I wish I hadn't looked. Isshin knelt and pulled Karen into a hug. What did you see? Karen took a shuddering breath. That technique, chi no aim, there's so much blood. Her father held her tighter, knowing there was very little he could say. The life of a Shinigami is not always pretty, Karen. I know it's disturbing, horrifying even. But you need to calm down. Urahara's on our side, and a decent man. He helped me save your mother before any of you were even born. He did? Yuzu asked curiously. Yes. Your mother, Masaki, got infected by a hollow that bit her. Her soul almost self-destructed. But Urahara found a way to save her. It cost me my Shinigami abilities for a very long time, but it gave me all of you. So that's why you left, Hitsugaya said, looking at Isshin with sudden understanding. That hollow attack, when you left for the living world. That was what sparked the whole thing. And you never came back because you couldn't, not without destroying her soul. But, she died years and years ago, right? I assume you didn't come back then because you had children to raise. Isshin nodded. Close. I only got my powers back recently, Toshiro. But I am sorry for abandoning you like that. Congrats on becoming Taicho of the 10th, figured that would probably happen as soon as you got your Bankai. Karen stared at her father in completely disbelief. Wait, you two knew each other before you met Mom? But how? This guy looks like a kid. Hitsugaya twitched, but kept his temper. I'm a lot older than you are, Kurosaki. I was your father's third seat when he was Taicho of the 10th Division in the Gotei. For your information, Shinigami age very, very slowly. I've looked about this age since before you were born. Both Karen and Yuzu stared at him in awe and disbelief. But, you, how old are you? Karen asked, shocked. I don't usually keep track of my age, but I should be about. Hitsugaya had to think on it for a few moments. 50, maybe. He smirked in response to the Kurosaki twins' shock. Shinigami live for a very, very long time. Yamamoto Sotecho, that old man. You saw on the screen. He's over 2,000 years old. Your father's probably around 300 or 400. When their stares turned back to him, Isshin grinned at his daughters, glad that he and Hitsugaya had successfully distracted them from thinking about Urahara's technique. Most Shinigami lose track after the first century, he cheerfully admitted. I don't honestly remember myself. I'm sure the Shiba clan has records somewhere, assuming that Kakaku hasn't destroyed them. I knew it. Rukia cried out in triumph. I knew Ichigo had to be related to Kayandano somehow. They looked far too alike for it to be coincidence. Yep, Isshin confirmed. Ichigo's a Shiba, but I'd rather he not catch wind of that just yet. It's something I'd like to tell him myself once this whole hell situation's done with. Speaking of which, Aayumu's back, Rose commented. Everyone immediately stopped their conversations and began paying attention to the display again. Aayumu didn't waste any time and attacked Urahara directly with Zanka no Tachi. The assassin seemed to have been taken by surprise at Aayumu's prompt assault, and the blade pierced him, setting him ablaze for a brief instant before Urahara crumbled into ash. But then Zanka no Tachi also disintegrated, and Aayumu stared at the hand where it had been in complete disbelief. What? Urahara reappeared a short distance away, completely unharmed. Chihari, Shinko Mauhi. Too late, Aayumu noticed he was standing on a puddle of blood, and bloody lances speared through his legs and knees, eliciting a cry of pain. How? Are you aware that there was a hollow that had the ability to destroy any Zanpakuto that touched it? Urahara asked, his eyes glittering with satisfaction. After I learned that such an ability existed, I knew I had to replicate it as my ultimate trump card against any Shinigami. I was only able to get it working recently, however. But once I did, it was almost too easy to modify a few select Jigai so I myself would not have to get stabbed. I'll have to apologize to Yamamoto later, but now we can attack you without our own weapons being destroyed. Aayumu let out a bloody grin. I see. So it's specific to Zanpakuto? And with that, he turned Asahi no Kagami on the hardened blood lances and shattered them. His wounds began to heal quickly, and he raised his free hand to the sky and snapped his fingers. All of a sudden, a hailstorm of weapons hurled out of the sky. Urahara looked at them before his expression twisted into a mischievous smile. Ayatsuru, Shinko Mauhi. The blood that had fallen to the ground suddenly shot back up to the sky, and strings of blood connected to the handles of all the weapons, connecting to Urahara's free hand. Why, thank you for the lovely gifts, Aayumu, Urahara told him with a mischievous grin as the weapons halted in midair before turning their points back against Aayumu. Sadly, I'm quite happy with Shinko Mauhi. Here, I insist you take them back. And then the weapons flew at Aayumu, who waited for them to get close before simply stomping the desert sand below him, causing an enormous section of it to rise up and catch all the weapons before falling back to where it had been. If you insist, Aayumu agreed demurely. I suppose I'll just need to give them back to their original owners. At those words, thousands, tens of thousands of Togabito began rising from the desert, stretching out as far as the eye could see. Urahara laughed aloud. Oh, you shouldn't have, he cried out in apparent delight. How thoughtful. Ayumu's smile froze on his face. That was not an anticipated response. All of the blood that Urahara had summoned with his chi no aim technique flew towards the assassin, pooling and swirling into a massive orb hovering of his head. Chihari, Shinko Mauhi, Urahara ordered with a devilish smile. It was a massacre. A short distance away, waiting for Aayumu to drop his guard, Ichigo thought he might retch. He could hardly breathe through the smell and taste of blood in the air. He watched with ill-disguised discomfort as Urahara makes short work of Aayumu's Togabito. And yet, not one of Urahara's kills left a bloodstain on the ground. Instead, Ichigo watched with wide eyes as with every slit throat, every maiming and outright bifurcation, all the blood within that body rose to join Urahara's technique. Did you really think you and Yamamoto were the only ones with a technique that was empowered by their kills? Urahara gleefully informed Aayumu as his technique skewered and slashed apart the last survivors. Every drop of blood I have ever spilled is mine to command, Aayumu. Thank you for the blood, I'll use it well. Aayumu blinked, and sighed. I grow tired of this. Enough. He stomped on the desert sand once more, and suddenly countless chains erupted around them all, rapidly shooting in every conceivable direction. Ichigo's arm blurred as Tensa Zangetsu flew into a flurry of slashes, chains shattering and links falling around him. When the onslaught ended, he glanced at Urahara, to see how he was. Urahara had encased himself in a shell of hardened blood. A moment later, the blood pulled away and regrouped, hovering over his head once again, noticeably larger than it had been before. Now then. My turn. The crimson water of life flew, encasing Aayumu in a shell that resembled the one that Urahara had just shielded himself in. And then, without warning, Urahara fell over. Chains had snaked around his ankles and tightened, sending him falling backwards to the desert sand. He hadn't even landed yet when, to Ichigo's horror, a spear erupted from the sands and pierced Urahara's head, emerging through his forehead. A moment later, Urahara's body dissolved. The blood shell fell apart, and Aayumu stepped forward, bleeding heavily from where he'd been stabbed in many places. "Very, very close," Aayumu whispered. "You nearly had me. A few seconds longer and you would have sealed my very blood. But you forgot that this world is mine to command. I can use any weapon belonging to any soul that resides here." Ichigo's eyes were wide in shock. But he shook his head, refocused. Urahara was dead. But he'd weakened Aayumu tremendously. If he attacked now, there was a good chance he could seal him. So Ichigo lunged for Aayumu, black flame coating his blade. "And I find yours to be useful." Tensa Zangetsu was blocked with Shinko Mauhi. "Oh shit," Ichigo let out. Aayumu's smile was slight, but confident. "Every drop of blood I have ever spilled, HM." Ichigo vanished in a blur of sonido just before bloody. Spears the width of his fist would have torn his body apart, uttering a litany of curses under his breath. But then, much to his surprise, the blood coalesced into a humanoid shape, and Urahara's voice came through. "Mayuri-chan's not the only one who can put safeguards in a bankai." Shinko Mauhi glowed a bright bloody red, and then erupted into a massive explosion. It faded several seconds later, and Ichigo clearly saw Aayumu's corpse just before it vanished. Ichigo felt the mad urge to laugh aloud. Of course Urahara would booby trap his bankai. But now it was down to Aayumu and Ichigo. There was no one else to call, no one else who could fight on the same level, outside of the Zero Division. They were sworn to protect the rail, so it wasn't likely they were going to help. Then again, it was worth trying. Ichigo reached up to his ear. "Anyone there?" "We're here, Ichigo." Isshin's voice was somber. Hardly surprising. He and Urahara must have known each other a long time. Ichigo swallowed hard. Urahara was dead. That hurt. But Urahara had known the risks, and had proven himself an incredible combatant. He'd effortlessly neutralized Zanka no Tachi, and had come incredibly close to sealing Aayumu away. And he hadn't been sent to the desert, that meant he'd be back as a Tagabito at some point. So Ichigo took a breath, hardened his heart and refocused on the immediate problem. "Contact the Zero Division," Ichigo ordered. "Yamamoto's dead. Urahara's dead. I think it's fairly evident now that we can't handle this situation and that it will escalate to the Rayo unless they step in." "Understood. What about you?" "I've got to stay here, keep Aayumu occupied. Besides, I have a sealing technique too." With Aayumu deprived of his armor, Zanka no Tachi and Shinko Mauhi, this is the best chance I'm going to get now that his soul's been completely restored. Ichigo could practically hear Isshin swallowing his first response. Finally, the father spoke. "Don't throw your life away, Ichigo." "I don't intend to. Even if it means sealing Aayumu," Isshin pressed. "You are to come home alive, you understand? I won't accept anything less. I won't hold it against you if you get hurt. I don't care if you're not the one who finishes him off. But I want you to swear to me, to your sisters, that you will come home alive." Ichigo's throat tightened. "Dad. You are my son, Kurosaki Ichigo, so I know exactly what you're thinking. But if by giving my life I can seal Aayumu, and save everyone else, isn't that worth it?" "No. It's not worth it, Ichigo. Not to me. Not to Yuzu or Karen. Not to anybody who cares about you." Ichigo stood there, stunned. Isshin's voice grew gentler. "You have been made to bear burdens that no young man should ever encounter. Tossed headfirst into the life of a Shinigami, learning about hollows and putting your life on the line to purify them. Forced by your own sense of honor and righteousness, despite knowing the potential for your own death, to save the girl who gave you the power to save your family. Becoming the final hope of the afterlife, and taking the life of someone with whom you could not help but empathize. Others trying to control you by attacking your family. And now the pressure of being the last man capable of fighting hell itself. It's too much, Ichigo. And it hurts, knowing what you have been put through. You are strong, I won't deny that. Strong in heart, strong in mind, strong in blade. I don't have words to express how proud I am of you, of the man you've grown up to be. But you are still so young. You haven't had a chance to really live, to see and experience all the wonders that life offers, to know more than war. Call it a father's selfishness if you must, but even if it means the world burns, I want you to come back alive. So swear you will. Swear it, or on Masaki's soul I will come in there right now and drag you out of hell myself. Put like that, how could he refuse? I swear. Good. Isshin sounded tired, but satisfied with himself. Now go kick his butt, Ichigo. Ichigo's grip on Tensa Zangetsu tightened as he spotted Aayumu approaching once more. You got it. Their eyes met. No words were exchanged. No words could persuade either combatant to yield, for each was convinced that their cause was righteous. There could be no compromise. There was only one thing to do. The sound of steel on steel rang as Asahi no Kagami met Tensa Zangetsu in a deadly dance of blades. Isshin ignored all the stares he was receiving from the others and instead approached Shinji. Take care of my children. What? Where you going? To get the 0 division, Isshin responded tersely. I'm a Shiba, and the Shibas have the only way up to see them. Ah. Shinji's eyes lit up in recognition. That cannon. All right. We'll take care of your girls. Isshin nodded, and turned to his daughters. Karen, Yuzu, I've got to go get help for your brother. Stay here with Ichigo's friends. I'll be back soon. There's no need to go anywhere, Kurosaki Isshin. Isshin twisted around to see a large, broad man step out of a portal that had opened from nowhere. The man's red eyes were piercing, yet kind. Combined with his bald head, his long black beard and large red prayer beads completed the monk look. You. He whispered. I am Hayasu Chibe, the large man announced loud enough for all to hear. The leader of the royal guard. Do not use my name lightly, lest you lose your voice. Are you here to help Ichigo? Karen asked pointedly. Ichibe looked at the young Kurosaki, scrutinizing her expression. That's a good look in your eyes, he mused aloud. Kurosaki Karen. I'll have to keep an eye on you. To answer your question, yes and no. Kurosaki Ichigo has the ability to defeat Aayumu. I am here to observe the method he uses. However, if he falls, then I will certainly step in and seal Aayumu. Why won't you help him now? Yuzu pleaded. Ichibe's face did not lose its smile when he turned to her and answered her simply. Because he's the one who restored Aayumu's mind and soul. But that was an accident. Renji yelled. He went to hell to rescue his mother and sisters. And his mother was sent there by Soul Society nobles to control him, Ishida spat. Enough. I know the circumstances of Aayumu's rebirth. I know what Kurosaki Ichigo has been doing to try to fix the threat he resurrected, the leader of the 0 Division said firmly. I and the rest of the Royal Guard hold no grudge against him. But as Kurosaki Ichigo is the one responsible for his revival, the Royal Guard will not interfere with his responsibility to defeat him. Isshin grit his teeth. Please, he begged quietly. He is my son, and he is still so young. Surely any debt he incurs can be paid by me. Ichibe shook his head. This is an edict from the Reo. I cannot interfere until the situation has escalated beyond that which the Godiai 13 and its allies can handle. Such is the duty of the Royal Guard. Ugh! What was that noise? After a moment, it became clearer, and suddenly, Masaki recognized it. The sound of blades. Her eyes shot open to see that a short distance away, her son and Aayumu were fighting, apparently evenly matched. How long had she been unconscious? Wait. How was she upright? It was only then that she noticed that she was being held against a pillar by chains. She glanced down at herself and was vaguely surprised to see that she was a Togabito again. So, she'd been killed, trying to escape with Yoruchi. That explained why she couldn't feel her Quincy powers, they were being suppressed by Aayumu. Masaki shifted a bit, trying to see how much wiggle room she had. Maybe she could worm her way out of the chains. No luck, the chains held her tightly. With little else she could do, Masaki returned her gaze to watching her son, praying that everything would turn out all right. Ichigo and Aayumu were constantly flashing and flickering, Tensa Zangetsu meeting Asahi no Kagami over and over. Aayumu landed on the desert sand for a moment, just long enough for Ichigo to materialize right above him, a Getsuga encased Tensa Zangetsu slamming down onto Asahi no Kagami. But then a dozen spears shot up from the sand, trying to impale Ichigo, only for the wizard to vanish and reappear to the side, wordlessly firing his Getsuga Tensho to destroy the spear and chasing it to re-engage with Aayumu. But Aayumu too vanished in a burst of high-speed movement, reappearing high above and far away. A wordless spell shone bright blue in his offhand before launching at his opponent, and Ichigo met the challenge with a roar, a crimson Siro charging between his horns and firing back. The Siro completely overwhelmed the nameless spell, but Aayumu was no longer there, instead trying to slice Ichigo open from behind. Tensa Zangetsu batted the attack away, and Ichigo retaliated with Heido 4, Byakurai. It grazed Ayumu's shoulder as the King of Hell dodged, but that was meaningless. Both knew that the wound would heal in moments. Both vanished once more and clashed in the air a short distance away from where they'd stood a split second before. Chains from Ichigo's left arm attempted to ensnare Ayumu's leg, but an almost dismissive swipe with Asahi no Kagami shattered them. But that was just enough time for Ichigo to fire a bala from between his horns, burning Ayumu's arm. Aayumu retaliated by leaping back several meters, materializing a dozen or so chains of hell, and grasping them. Ichigo grit his teeth and took chase, only for Aayumu to conjure a second sword in his offhand and give a vertical slash in Ichigo's direction. A high-powered wind buffeted Ichigo, but somehow the wind was incredibly sharp, leaving gashes in his body even in that second it took Ichigo to Sonido away. They healed in seconds, but Aayumu smiled grimly, having found a suitable weapon and tactic to fight Ichigo with. He swung his yet unnamed sword at Ichigo, unleashing another deadly gale. Ichigo vanished and reappeared a few meters away on Aayumu's left, and made a sharp motion with his left arm, wordlessly casting Bakudo 1, Sai. Aayumu was startled when his arms were suddenly forced behind his back, but it took only a second to break the spell and flee. But that second was long enough for Ichigo to cut both of Aayumu's hands off. Asahi no Kagami and the nameless wind-enchanted sword fell the desert sands as Aayumu flashed away to regenerate, and Ichigo flung a large, condensed blast of purple fire, Heido 54, Heian, at them with the intent to destroy. He only managed half, the wind-empowered sword began melting instantly, and Ichigo could sense its powers being destroyed, but Asahi no Kagami disappeared less than a second after the fire had hit it. Ichigo extended his senses, ready to re-engage with the King of Hell, but found nothing. Then again, that was to be expected. He still couldn't sense Aayumu at all. He slowly looked around, listening carefully. Suddenly, a gigantic beam of blue and white Ryatsu heavily tinged with lightning erupted out of nowhere from his left side. Ichigo promptly leaped to the side and out of the way. It was only then that he noticed that Masaki and Yoruchi were in the spell's direct path. With a burst of Sonido, Ichigo appeared right in front of them, using both hands to slice downwards with a Getsuga-enhanced Tensa Zangetsu. And breaking the silence, Ichigo's voice was cold, angry, and powerful. Getsuga Tensho. The black moon fang carved the spell in twain, sending it to either side of the three of them. But Ichigo was completely blindsided when Asahi no Kagami cut off his left arm. Roaring in pain as the arm fell to the ground, pouring blood, and cursing himself for getting distracted, Ichigo leapt up and away from Ayumu's latest onslaught in the hopes of getting Aayumu away from his mother. At the same time, he began shunting Ryoryoku into his regenerative abilities. Not to be deterred, Aayumu threw many spells and weapons at Ichigo, but Ichigo began moving his right arm at hyperspeed, slicing through and deflecting everything that came his way. It took only a few seconds longer for Ichigo's left arm to be completely regenerated, but Ichigo would have to be careful for a bit. That had eaten a pretty large chunk of his Ryuryoku and it reflected in his Bankai. His arm did not have the sleeve. It would take a while for his passive Racial absorption to make up the difference. Not for the first time, Ichigo wondered if Aayumu would ever get tired in his dimension. Ichigo locked gazes with Aayumu, each tensed and ready to begin their war once again. But they were interrupted by a heartfelt plea from the pillars only meters away. "Don't die, Ichigo." Ichigo's eyes flicked over to his mother, who was staring at him with tears streaming down her face. "Mom. Please," Masaki whispered, tears streaming from her face. "You don't have to win. You don't have to fight for me. Just live." Her voice cracked with raw emotion, her face a mask of emotional torment. "I know you've been risking your life for so long. I know I have no right to ask you to stop. But I can't bear watching you get hurt, Ichigo. And the fact that you're doing it for me, that you're risking not just your life but your soul for me, it hurts more than I can bear. Mom." Ichigo breathed, not knowing what to say. "I can't let you do this," Masaki let out a choked sob. "You're my precious son. Please, just leave me here. Our family needs you. Our family needs you too." Ichigo roared back. "You don't understand how hard it was to keep going when you died for me. You don't understand that it was you dying for me that birthed my inner hollow. It was your death that drove me to despair. Because it was my fault you got killed by the Grand Fisher." Masaki shook her head violently, denying his words. "Ichigo, you were a child. It wasn't your fault." "I know that now," Ichigo conceded. "It wasn't something that could be avoided, not after Aizen ordered the Grand Fisher to kill you. If it hadn't been that day, it would have been the next, or the one following. I was too young to protect you. But during those years where I was convinced that it was my fault, that I had taken you from Dad, from Yuzu, from Karen, I made a vow to myself." Ichigo's power flared higher and higher, making the very air shake under the weight of his Ryatsu. And yet Aayumu's gaze was locked onto Ichigo's eyes, each of them glowing ominously with overwhelming resolve. "Never again. Never again would I fail to live up to my name. Never again would I fail to protect the ones I love. I am Kurosaki Ichigo, he who protects, the #1 guardian." Ichigo brought Tensa Zangetsu up to a ready position. "I will save you, Mom. And everyone who's helped me. Yoruchi, Urahara, Yamamoto, Harabel. I'm going to get them all out of here. And then the Tagabito who have repented and simply want to move on to the next life. I'll find a way to save them too." Black flame emerged from Tensa Zangetsu's tip and flowed up the blade, up his arm and stopped at his shoulder. Looking at it, Masaki found she couldn't tell anymore where Ichigo's arm ended and Tensa Zangetsu began. "You cannot kill me, Aayumu. I made a promise to come home alive. So come at me, King of Hell. Do you have the strength to break my resolve?"